Make sure this is recording. As we go back into this novel. After Ulra's history starts to become unraveled among the Keen Wolf Odajasko, you find strange advice from the unlikeliest source. History of violence. The lull reigned for days. They struggled at the oars. Every evening when they anchored, their shoulders burned like fire from the hardship. Endless hours passed as they pushed the oars through the water, in and out, over and over and over again. Their mood dwindled, so did their food. Soon little remained of their supplies. And on top of it all, the days of Hrongar loomed still too, ill and full of strife. This is an interesting choice of tale for times like these. You jump out of your skin as Estrid quietly interrupts from next to you. You lean back against the railing, having not heard or seen her approach, so engrossed were you in the tale. She manages to smile at your reaction to her appearance, but it is small and weak. Don't do that! You keep your voice low to not disturb the storyteller's work. Apologies, Outlander. I didn't realize you were so engrossed in it. You quickly look back to the storyteller, who is waving her hands wildly through the air as she speaks. Suddenly, there were dull thumps against the hull that shook the entire ship. The Odajasko looked around and feared, but soon came the second strike. She is delivering the story very well. Estrid plays close attention for a few moments as the storyteller continues. She describes how even seasoned veterans of the ocean clawed at the railing in fear of some beast attacked. How others went for their axes and their swords as tentacles began ripping the ship apart. Estrid chuckles and nods, speaking quietly to you again. Yes, she is. I don't think I've ever heard it told quite so well. Together you stand against the guardrail and listen to more of the storyteller's work. It is quite the epic. She describes in great detail a long but drawn-out fight against a monstrous sea beast. She describes how the Odajasko was saved when all hope seemed lost by a great whale, likened to Swafnir himself. Estrid seems amused by the Odajasko's joy at the particular detail, more than being taken by it herself. When all is said and done, the Odajasko of the story was escorted back to land by the same whale. Not the land they sought, the storyteller tells you all, but safely back to Oldport whence they came. Not one of that Odajasko ever again thought to seek out Swafnir's Island. Swafnir's Land. Swafnir's Land? Is that how you would say that? I guess that's how you would say that. You can tell from the tone and tempo of her voice that this is the end of the tale. Instead, every person every day thanked Swafnir for their rescue. The audience erupts into a round of applause and light cheers as the storyteller grins and bows her head. The mood on the Keen Wolf is in recent days never been as high as it probably is now, you think. But even underneath the claps and whoops of cheers, you can still hear the exhaustion and anxiety the fiend has left in its wake. What is Swafnir's Land? I don't think I've ever heard anyone speak of that on my travels through Thorwall. Or people say that when Jurga... I have such a hard time pronouncing all of these names. Jelf's daughter sailed out of the west. Swafnir's Land is where she landed first. It is said she spoke with Swafnir himself there, and he directed her onwards to Oldport. That is how the Thorwallers arrived here in these lands. Swafnir's Land is our holiest of places, but since the first voyage out of the west, no one has ever returned there. With the tale now old, noise starts to rise up across the Keen Wolf's deck. It is too early for you all to sleep, and right now you are too nervous and tense to try anyway. Off? Yeah, I will try that next time. Instead, you and Estrid take full opportunity of the cold but fresh night air and remain on deck. You sit together by the starboard guardrail, looking eastwards towards the Thorwallian coast. Landfall really cannot come soon enough, but at the same time I'm worried. I keep thinking about everything we learned of Orville after the raid. What if it is a trap? Should we depend on him? I wish I felt more certain about any of it. We have to try to look forwards, not back. The more we question and doubt, the more the fiend has to torment us with. That is only going to make the fight even harder than it already was. I know. It's just hard. As the two of you talk, you become aware of more movement off to your left. From the opposite side of the jutting door leading down below deck, you see Darksong looking around nervously. The only thing there is in Orville's quarters, and so you deduce rather quickly that is where she came from. Before she can slink away down the stairs, though, she sees that you are looking right at her. Immediately, she folds her arms tightly around her and speeds along towards the hatching. Alf! She freezes as she hears Estrid calling out to her. Do you have a moment? You can just make out her expression, the flickering light of the candles hanging just beyond the door. Her eyes are closed and her lips are taut before she blinks and turns her towards you again. Carefully, she makes her way over, nodding at you before turning to Estrid. We were talking about Orville. I wanted to know something from you. What were you doing in Orville's quarters when we went to speak to him, if I may ask? She glances from one to the other of you as she cocks her head slightly and lets her hands free. Why? She takes one gloved hand to clutch at the end of her hood, shielding the scars on her neck from your gaze. It surprised me. I just want to understand your part in all of this. Darkstone looks from one to the other of you again, clearly unsure about the situation. I think it is a fair sentiment. We still know next to nothing about you, other than you are also marked by the Fiend. Orville has been nothing but a hindrance to us one way or the other ever since our journey began. It seems strange that the two of you would end up being so closely aligned. Darksong releases her hood and plays with the material of her gloves instead, unable to look at you. Delicately turns into her rubbing one of her wrists as she thinks. Eventually she cocks her head again, opens her mouth to speak, and then sighs. I think I understand Orville better than most aboard this ship. I see a lot of myself in him. We were talking, then and now, about what he's been through and what he's going through. He told you what happened. I will not divulge his secrets. That is for him and him alone to do. Once more she glances back and forth between you before she sighs and sets herself down on the floor next to you. She opens the small pouch on her belt and you see her produce her carving knife and the figurine with it. Immediately she starts cutting into it, focused almost completely on that as she talks to you. Did either of you start to think about why I don't like talking about myself? You and Estrid glance at each other for a moment, unsure how to continue. I suppose your scars speak to that. Someone hurt you. It's difficult to talk about. Darksong's expression immediately sharpens, and a large fleck goes flying off the block of wood in her hands. That is part of it. But I have also hurt others. I have hurt innocents violently, too. After a moment more of carving, she stops before making a new cut and looks dead ahead of her. With another long sigh, she spins the knife deftly in her hand and then drives it into the keen wolf's neck. The strike is strong enough that the metal sinks into the wood, and when she releases the blade, it stays stuck. Darksong is still staring in front of her, slowly pulling her sleeve-length gloves off her hands. The skin revealed beneath them is incredibly pale, long deprived of sunlight. Both of her arms are covered in well-defined scars that are etched in bumps and crevices across the surface. They're small and precise, and not an inch of her skin has been spared from them. Pain and fear can drive you to very desperate measures. After curling her fist, she sets about fitting her gloves back on and tucking her sleeves into them. If you think you are going to lose something and are desperate not to, eventually you will break. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be. Just try to understand. She takes a moment to collect herself, making sure her gloves are tight on her arms and rubbing at her wrists. Once again, she uses a hand to pull the hem of her hood up around her neck and hide the scars there too. Anyway, how this relates to Orville. Not everyone does bad things for bad reasons. Does that make those things better? No. But if we are desperate, I think it should count for something. And once you have done something like that, it isn't necessarily shame that eats at you. It separates from those around you. It makes you feel alone. And when you feel alone, you look at people differently. You watch every action and reaction, you think over everything they say until all meaning is lost. You lie, you keep secrets, you lash out when you don't need or mean to. She gives a pointed look to Estrid, who you remember being almost thrown overboard by Orville. Eventually, it just becomes easier to not engage at all, simply to avoid the discomfort of having to face it all. Now Darksong stops, glances over at both of you, and goes back to her carving work. If we don't know what the problem is, we can't help resolve it. If there is a reason for Orville to act the way he has, why not talk to someone about it? Why not Gunnar, for example? That I cannot tell you for certain. If it were me, I would not want those closest to me to know. But Gunnar does. I did not say I had all the answers, just that I think I understand him. The three of you sit in silence for a little while as the moon continues its way across the dark sky. Eventually, Darksong puts the knife away and pulls some material out of her pouch. Your ears tune to the sound of her standing the figurine down, smoothing its edges and curves. I'm sorry that I can't help more. You are a little taken aback with the comment and stay silent. It is not too late. There's plenty of time for you to tell us more. Darksong chuckles as she continues her standing work. Humans are so incessantly curious. If you were elves, I would tell you my name is Darksong and you would know what that means. And as for Orlver, the simple truth, it is not my place. And she says you would know what that means. Your memory stretches back to the fiend's attack during the storm. The one in which you saw Darksong in the depths of some great woods, and she told you no one could understand. Her skin, mottled in pale gray, her face gaunt and covered in thousands of tiny scars. Is that how she sees herself? Next to you, Estrad sighs and stands up, stretching. Very well. Then I only hope your secrecy doesn't do more damage before we have to face the fiend. I will try to sleep. I bid you both good night. With only a slight nod to you, Estrad gives Darksong one last careful look before she walks away. As you hear her walk down below deck, you turn back to the elf. I do mean it. Perhaps I can make it up to you. You are already beginning to stand and are a little startled when she leaps up after you. You are a guild mage, are you not? A talented one from what I saw during the raid. Oh, thank you. You were unsure what else to do with the compliment, so decided to just let it sit. Darksong gives a truly genuine smile as she sees your discomfort. There is a spell I think I might be able to teach you. It is late in the voyage, I know, but it may still come in useful when facing the fiend. And if you survive that, it will prove a useful tool should you find yourself in another Thorwallian raid. Stand opposite me. You are still flustered at the spontaneous nature of the lesson, taking a bit of time to prepare yourself. Darksong is incredibly patient, waiting for you to get into a position where you can move your arms freely. The easy part first. Put your hands like this. She spreads her fingers wide and crosses her arm into an X shape in front of her, close to her chest. You follow suit. Easy enough. Alma Tharza. As she speaks, she brings her hands downwards so that the cross parts and her arms fall to her sides. Covers your skin in magical armor, hardening it without losing flexibility to provide natural protection. It may allow Nadim to make more risk in combat without risk of injury. Arma Tarza. You try to mimic the dialect she's speaking as you copy the motions. Again, easy enough, but nothing happens. Darksong gives you a small smile. Ma, but that is only half of it. You mouth the dialect yourself again, though Darksong has already moved on. Elves view magic differently than humans. It isn't a formula and a gesture to simply be recited, as much as it is a connection. Connecting you to the world, or the environment around you. Yes. It is like a fabric that can be manipulated almost. For elves, it is instinctual to use. The words and motions we use are less commands and more what comes to us naturally. That does not mean it is impossible for you to learn. You must treat the space between your arms and your body as though there is life there. She goes through the motions to spell again as she speaks, sounding almost entranced. Your words should be an appeal instead of a demand. Try that. You nod and square your feet again, processing everything she has said before spreading your fingers. Almatharza. This time you feel it. No sooner are your arms by your sides does your skin all across your body begin to itch uncomfortably. You shudder and squirm as it happens, and your body feels like it's tightening slightly. But then the discomfort fades, and you stand much like you did before. Was it supposed to happen? Darksong chuckles softly. With one hand she takes a dagger from her belt, and the other she stretches out towards you. May I? Very slowly you offer your hand, and she pulls up the sleeve up just a little so that your arm is free. She twists so that the outside of your arm is upwards towards the sky. And then very slowly, very gently, she prods at the skin with just the point of her dagger. The skin doesn't even as much as move, let alone break against a sharp point. Well done. Again with great care, she lets your arm free and tucks her dagger away. I am sure the guild mages probably know a way to cast the same magic in their sense too, but that is beyond me. How long will it last? Long enough to survive a fight, I would hope. Of course, I don't know how effective it will be against the fiend, but very little helps. But every little bit helps? Is that? I thought that's what I said. Darksong bows her head to you, rubbing at each of her wrists in turn. I know it is only a small thing, but I truly hope it helps. She looks around. The deck is quieter and quieter as night stretches on. We should both try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will doubtlessly be another long day. With that, she bows her head to you and turns towards the stairs below deck. Well, I've healed a little bit, so there's that. Let's save again. Yes. Okay. After the fiend attacks the Keen Wolf again, the crew demand answers from their hetman, and a terrible secret is revealed. Fight or flight? You still feel your blood boiling. It has found the pit of your stomach and is simply churning there, turning into something awful. You have to do something. You can't just sit in the garden forever and let it define you. But how? Who, if not the people here? What if the problem isn't them? But there, your thoughts are interrupted by something very far away, the echo of a song you once heard. It's alien to your ears, familiar, but also entirely different from anything else you remember hearing. Peaceful and quiet, full of melancholy and regret. It twists your stomach into a tight knot that makes you hate it. It tiptoes across your mind like a dark shadow until it sits down on the bench next to you in an all too familiar form. What does it say about you, Nadim? That you're so unwilling to think back on this moment? Is it because of how it made you feel? Or is it because you regret doing nothing about it? Because this is your chance to change that, now that I'm here and looking at you in the face. Now you can release all that anger, all that resentment. You did what you had to. You speak through your teeth, forcing the words out even if you don't know that you believe them. Really. With a single word, the Fim throws all the doubt and aggravation back at you and your chest stings sharply. Is that what you think, Nadim? And there it is, that cruel smirk that you both detest and fear. You must understand by now. Your skin crawls as you hear his voice, wrapped with some deeper, darker power that sets every fiber of your being on edge. Even if you killed me, even if you could, still you could not face him or any of them, and least of all yourself. And that will haunt you even if I don't. I understand now, more than I did before. I can go back when this is over, make a stronger argument. I can make them understand too, but you won't. Because that would still mean having to face yourself. And this being over... Don't be so naive, Nadim. This will never be over. You'll never be rid of me now. Above your head, there's a muted rumble of thunder, slow and rippling across the sky. It melts into a deep, blood-curdling chuckle that makes your fists curl of their own accord. In the corner of your eye, you just glimpse the golden flare of the figment's eyes as he looks at you. Here I come again, as quickly as fleeting shadow. The figment is in front of you. You try desperately to look away, but it's as if he is seared into your eyes so that you can never look away. There's another crack of thunder. No, that's just a laugh. Though they sound so similar, you aren't sure you can tell them apart anymore. Oliver is right, Nadim. There is no hope. There was never any hope. The moment that you and he and the Hetman's child all came together, I was never going to be able to resist. It was too easy. I knew even then, you were never going to be able to defeat me. The voice grates and grates at the inside of your head, losing any tone or timbre that made it sound like Zahir. What remains is the dark, fearsome horror that lay beneath it, droning in your mind like a swarm of insects. I'm not doomed. I'm not. The fiend laughs that hideous laughter and you flinch out on the bench again. Yes, you are, even more so now than when we first met. But it doesn't matter, because you cannot possibly hope to beat me with the likes of Orville by your side. It is better for you to run. There is another movement in front of your eyes, again like a fleeting shadow. And once again the fiend is at your shoulder, whispering through your ear into the back of your mind. Would it help you to know how it is I really found you? Then, would you understand that you cannot possibly hope to succeed? Now there's a definite crack of thunder, tearing it across your head so violently that you flinch. Awaken. Your eyes flash open. Your hammock swings wildly and you flail as you roll off it, hitting the deck hard and with a wince. All around you hear boots stamping against wood as people run across the commons. You shake your head as you push yourself up again, breathing hard. You feel an all too familiar sense of dread building in your gut, and you hope beyond hope that it was just a dream. But something has happened. That much is clear from the panic of the Odajasko all heading for the stairs. You just wish it wasn't. A crash of thunder interrupts your thoughts, and the boom behind it sends you rocking into the mast. You want to feel annoyed, simply frustrated that this is happening again, but you don't. You just feel angry and alone, and afraid. You want to run. You want to be left alone, but you know you can't. Past all of the pain, past all of the confusion, part of you knows this cannot go on. You have to try, and so you head towards the stairs too. The third clap of thunder comes as you reach the Keen Wolf's deck. It rocks you so violently that you are nearly thrown back down the stairs. But you catch yourself in the door frame to secure your footing, waiting for the Keen Wolf to steady itself before continuing. Estra is by your side in the flash, glowering around as she glances at the clouds bubbling and roiling in the sky. I hoped we might at least reach the sword before it attacked again. There really is nowhere we can hide. It is only a vision, remember that. Whatever happens, it's only a vision. Estrid nods but swallows nervously as she pushes out past you onto the deck. Everyone is streaming out into the night, looking at the wisps of cloud that do not belong to the roaring thunder. The very light of the moon seems to ripple and bubble as the hole in your gut slowly tears itself wider. You can hear the thunder in your ears before it echoes out into the world around you. Even as prepared for it as you have ever been, there is no escape from it. It tears through your mind and brings you straight to your knees. For just a moment, the world explodes into a dazzling display of thousands of millions of tiny colors. And then there is only darkness. The rank stench of burning wood catches in your nose and you open your eyes in a panic. The fire roars in your ears and the flames flash before your eyes, staggering you. At the last moment you catch yourself, and that's when you hear the shouting cries from nearby. You look all around you. The clear night sky, smoke, soot, and ash, bleeding up toward it from the flames. 1, 2, 3 buildings on fire, completely ablaze in the night. It could be any burning village, but you know in your heart that it isn't. Windhaven. This is Windhaven. You aren't sure who you are talking to. There is no one nearby. No sign of the Odroskan or Estrid or Orlver. Orlver. Your attention turns to the chorus of loud and encouraging cheers. That's where you have to go. It isn't long before you start to feel sweat beating on your skin. It must be high summer, and if it weren't already hot enough, there are flames to contend with too. You don't spread much further than the buildings where they started, but they are strong and intense. They fill the air not just with smoke and ash, but a rippling haze that makes it even harder to see. But as the cries become louder, you know you are in the right place. The path between buildings opens up into a square where a large group of people are gathered. Between you and them, you see Orlver pacing back and forth and tapping the hilt of his axe with his fingers. And just a few yards closer to you, a man is being dragged towards him with his hands tied. When he's thrown down in front of Orlver, he lies very still for a long moment. You continue onwards, giving Orlver a wide berth as you walk to such an angle that you can see who the man is. Very slowly, he pushes himself up into his arms. You catch sight of the orange robes in the firelight, and for a moment your mind seems to stall. But you recognize the gleaming golden pendant hanging around his neck. The man is a blessed one of Travia. What's happening? Please, we are people of peace here. Please just leave us be. Your heart leaps into your throat as you realize that you know that voice. You've heard it before. You've been where that blessed one now lies. You were in his place the last time the fiend dragged you into this terrible place. You start to speak, but the moment your lips part, you feel how dry your throat is, how parched you feel. And you do not know at all whether you can affect anything in this place. It is a vision, not a dream. Is there a difference? Can you test what might happen if you can? Your thoughts are recentered as you see Orlver quicken his pace, looking at the crowd behind him. You catch his eyes in the flame, and you see the same half-formed plan of malcontent you saw in the last attack. When he turns back to the Blessed One, you see him raise his bound hands as if to confirm he means no harm. Please, take anything you would like, just leave us in peace. Quiet. The Blessed One jumps out of his skin at Orlver's bark, quickly looking away at the floor. Orlver otherwise ignores the interruption, just pacing back and forth, back and forth. The more you see him move, the more animalistic it seems to become. Back and forth, like a wolf waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. You don't have to do this. You blurt the words out, and Orville stops pacing, turning on his heels to look at you from across the space. Really, stranger. Listen to them. He raises his axe to point at the crowd off to your right, and your ears tune into their cries. Come on, Orlver, show him. Send him a message, Orlver. Make him scared. Come on. It all hits you at once. It's stunning, really. Emotions running high, caught up in a single moment. Expectations set higher and higher after every victory. How do you keep up the legend? How do you ensure that you are always feared by your enemies and revered by your friends? You shake your head to clear and turn back to the situation at hand. The Blessed One has raised his hands to talk again, carefully choosing when and how to look Orville in the eye. Your people worship Travia too, do they not? Then you must know that if you do this, you are only dooming yourself. The gods do not look upon those who turn away from their paths. A calmness has come across the man amidst all the violence and the chaos. You can hear the wobble of fear in his voice, but it is as though he has simply chosen to fight through it. Just say what needs to be said and what you need to hear. If you do this, you'll never know peace of mind again. All joy and happiness will be stripped from what you love. Those you look to for respect will now only bring you dissatisfaction, and there will be nowhere in the world you can go without feeling discontent. Do you really believe you can live like that? Orlver is looking at the ground, his free hand clenched tightly while the fingers of the other tap, tap, tap away at his axe. You fell to the pressure. They both look at you from across the square and you slowly nod. So much more makes sense to you now, all of a sudden. All of the stories, all of the respect. You felt like you needed to keep going, keep pushing so that no one lost faith in you. And then you pushed yourself too far and made yourself a target for the fiend. And you made us a target for it too. Underneath all the noisy chaos, you are certain you can hear the deep, soulless chuckle that crawls up your spine. Oliver is pacing once again, his eyes now on the crowd. Then on the Blessed One, and then back on the crowd. The corner of his lips twitch and twist into a snarl in the firelight, and he looks at the Blessed One again. Orlver, You hear Gunnar's cracked voice push through the crowd, and you see him break through to the front. No, Ulver, not like this. Ulver barely glances at him, his eyes flicking to the rest of the group, still chanting away behind his friend. He grits his teeth and taps his fingers on his axe again, pacing, pacing, pacing. But then he is next in front of the blessed when he stops and looks at the man one more time. The sky is thick with smoke and ash, but somewhere above you, you are certain you hear thunder. They will fear me. Your attention snaps back to Ulver as he starts stalking towards the Blessed One menacingly. They will. Ah, shit. Really gonna put this choice on my shoulders, aren't you? No, you cannot stand back and watch. With as much speed as you can muster, you cast the blinding flash formula with a complete focus on Ulver. Staggers backwards just before he reaches the Blessed One and prepare yourself for a second spell. Go, run, I'll hold him off. Now you are certain you hear it. Another whirly chuckle that seeps into you from all around, but also ripples out the depths of your mind. No, Dundee. You turn away. You can't help it. His voice draws you to look at him, standing just a few feet away in front of the crowd. Zahir, except for those golden eyes and that cruel, cruel smile. You want to know how it is I found you. Now you must look upon it. There is no escape. Too late do you realize what has happened, and you shake your head clear of the vision. But now your attention flicks back to Ulver, this time see him lunging to the Blessed One with a cry. It is gruesome to watch. It is not quick, and it is certainly not painless. It is cruel, violent, and bloody. For his part, the Blessed One doesn't beg. He knows the end is coming, and he has said everything he needs to say. He knows he could not make Ulver listen, and you are simply harrowed into a stunned silence. What shocks you most is not the violence or even the cruelty. It's not even Ulver himself. It is the reaction of the crowd that truly terrifies you. They cheer for him, jeer him on. Was it all in Ulver's head, or were they actually as bad as he was? Worse even. It makes you angry, not just at Ulver, but at them for driving him to a point where he felt he needed to impress them. What do you do? How far are you willing to go? To make sure you are feared by your enemies and revered by your friends. Your eyes flicker open. Far above you, you hear the last echoes of the last roll of thunder dissipate into the void. Beneath your nose, you smell the richness of wood soaked in seawater. This time it's not like the others. Your mind works out a moment before your consciousness catches up. It is like awakening from a dream, more than being ripped out of one reality and put inside another. Take a deep breath in and slowly push yourself off the deck of the Keen Wolf. Your head is still spinning as you stand, you fall forwards onto your knees, nursing your head. Around you, everyone is groaning and grumbling, picking themselves up or catching the guardrails sickly. Everyone, not just you, not just Estrid, not just Swafneld, Maidner, or Darksong. Every single person. They have all turned pale, as if they had just witnessed a brand new horror completely unknown to them before. They are all wide-eyed and breathing deeply, all looking about as if expecting the threat to come again. They've all seen it. You know in a single moment that the crack opened that night in Ulfgar's hall had splintered and widened again, just as it did on the way to the Alkenfelsen. Then Swafnid, Maidner, and Darksong were marked. The tensions around board the Key Wolf, the nervousness and the uncertainty, have let the fiend even further in. There is no escaping it. We delayed far too long. Your voice comes out as a broken croak, as if your throat is scared by flame and smoke. You cough, close your eyes, and rub at your neck for a moment to find that it is sore. And you are feeling like a little drained too, as if exerting yourself in the vision had left its mark in reality. Then you shake your head and try to get back to it. We've delayed for too long. The longer we wait, the more of a chance this creature has to infect all of us. As far as I see it, Dirge coughs loudly and harshly and even spits over the side of the ship before he tries again. As far as I see it, that is only down to one person. He looks around the gathering and also across the deck until all eyes fall on Gunnar. Gunnar is collapsed against the bulkhead that makes up the doorway down below deck. His head is leant on his hands, leant on his knee, and he looks as though he knows exactly what is coming. How could you just let him get away with that? Adair, Gunnar, Adair. What more do you expect I could have done, George? By the time I got there, there would have been no stopping him. The tone of Gunnar's question stings you, no matter how much you might agree with George. It is defeated, lost, and lonely, broken. I did everything I could. I always have. Before anyone can argue, a doorway creaks open and everyone turns towards Orlver's quarters. All eyes fall on him as he walks slowly out onto the deck. It reminds you every bit of the night you first saw him, striding into Ulfgar's hall. Except this time he greased every single one of the stairs, looking back at each person in turn. He stopped a few feet from George, between him and Gunnar. Say what you have to say to me, not to him. Why? You find yourself having to suppress a shake as you ask your question. You aren't even sure you want to know the answer. Because I wanted the recognition, Outlander. I needed it. Are you out of your mind? Now all eyes turn to Estrad, who steps angrily through the crowd to stand next to George. Is that really all you have to say? You beat and tortured a dyer to death. You should have been brought before a Jarl and sentenced to be peaceless. Estrad spits out an angry chuckle and shakes her head, unable to stand looking at Orvor anymore. I'm not even sure why I'm surprised anymore. Silence falls on the Keen Wolf again, shunned, broken, and horrified. It's the other faces of those you're closest to that stand out. Swapton looks hurt, torn, and a little confused. Darkson looks at Orvor with the same mixture of sadness and puzzlement that she has always had for him. Maynard looks the least surprised of them, glancing at Orvor and Gunnar as if he suspected this might happen. But it is Gunnar who eventually breaks the silence from the floor of the deck, shrugging meekly. What is this, if not exile? He weakly indicates the ship and slowly picks himself up so that he can be heard by all. They were not just words that the dyer spoke that night. Travia heard them and she acted upon them. Every time we returned to Thorwall, people were a little more wary and a little more worried. Some of the Odajasko had a change of heart, left of their own accord, and never spoke of it. Any joy that anyone felt about it was ripped away in a matter of weeks. And eventually we couldn't face it anymore. So we captured the Keen Wolf, and I dismissed any who remained who were with us in Windhaven, to avoid the same mistakes, to free Orvor from his burden. And we tried to start again. That is not the same. George takes less than a breath to cut in on Gunnar's explanation, stepping a few steps forward. Orvor is in front of him in a flash, towering over the raider to warn him off approaching Gunnar. You should know that it is not the same. Perhaps you should try being abandoned by the gods. Then tell me what real exile is. The difference is, you doomed us too, Orvor. Swapnen's step into the conversation takes everyone by surprise, and all eyes now turn to her instead. All of these years, we all sailed with you with the great tales from your childhoods in mind. Do you think any of us would have done so if we had known the truth? What must Travia think of this? She stops and thinks for a moment and then winces and curses. That is why the demon's tooth failed. Not one of us has Travia's blessing to use it. The fiend knew from the beginning. That is why it has always been so confident. It can sense the mark of its enemy. Now Maedner speaks up too, nodding his head as he thinks out loud. And then also the lack of that mark, and so when Orvor steps too close to it in this epistle, George rounds on him with an accusatory finger. I have a question for you too, Maedner. Because you were here before most of us, even before the likes of Swaffield and Torkel, I think. Did you know of this? I did not know the details until tonight. I certainly was not there. There is an honesty to Maedner's voice that makes you glad, but I was beginning to suspect in the last attack. There are only a few things that would explain Orville's unwillingness to seek help from a dyer of Travia, particularly when dealing with the servant of her greatest enemy. Now that dawns on you too, and you find yourself staring at the dark blue of starry sky and a tired roll of your eyes. And why you were left unmarked, Gunnar, until tonight. Do you really feel no shame at all in being a part of it? I have always tried to stop Orville from giving in to his worst instincts, ever since we were boys. It was never in doubt that what happened in Windhaven was utterly down to Orville's choices. He knows that too. A flick of your eyes across Orville reveals the same sullen, steady stare that reveals nothing about Orville's thought on the matter. I have spent every winter since then trying to help him move past it. That is all I can do. Estrad looks far from satisfied about the answer, but says nothing more, words failing her. So, what do we do about it? The question invites another awkward silence forwards. Many of the crew shift uncomfortably, and Gunnar looks from person to person expectantly. Orvor stands like a statue, simply waiting. I want to put forward a vote. Orvor cannot be let to continue on as hetman of our Odajasko. For weeks now, he has served his own interests over the good of all of us, and now we are marked just like he is because of him. And if that isn't bad enough, there is this business in Windhaven to think of too, but we'll get to that. Regardless of what else happens here today and how this ends, there are at least a handful of better candidates. I think it's time they're given the chance to prove it. That was one. The crew looks at Gunnar for confirmation, ignoring Orvor almost completely. Gunnar looks incredibly pained, incredibly torn. Orvor is moved to at least look at the crew, who seem to have already abandoned him. His usual steady gaze holds, barely with perhaps a hint of shock and surprise and sadness. But all eyes are now back on Gunnar, who eventually has little choice but to buckle at George's request. Fine, vote as you will. George quickly looks back to you all. All in favor of Orville's removal as hetman, move to the ship's port side. All against to starboard. Those who don't care to vote to the mast. I mean, okay. Okay. Okay, so it is definitely Orlver's fault. I'm not going to deny that. But I don't think he should be removed. I think he should keep the authority. I feel like you should keep the authority and fix it, but I don't know. Let's see. Oh, my blanket fell. Okay, you know what? You know what? You know what? I am technically not a Thorwalder, so I feel like I should abstain from the vote and let them decide. Yes. Oh, yeah, hold on. I can move her. Here. I'll put her over here. The only thing over here is the menu to save and stuff, so you don't need to see that. There you go. Is that better? And I think I'm going to abstain from the vote. That seems like the smart course. You can't make up your mind, so you walk to the mast. Gunnar and Darksong join you there without a word. Most of the rest go to the port side at varying degrees of certainty. Only a handful don't, and none of them are people you know well. The last person to vote is Orlver. Perhaps it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that he abstains as well, not even caring enough about his own future to try to secure it. Then it's settled. George steps forward again so that he is standing where all three groups can see him. We all know what needs to be done next. We must make the shore and allow those willing to hunt the fiend. After that is done, all those who wish to put their names forward as het person may do so, and we shall decide on a new path for ourselves. But there is another question to be answered first. Does Orlver even deserve to stay among us, or should he be exiled from the Odajasko, as he would have been had he been brought before a Jarl? Now, hold on, George. As Gunnar goes to step forward, Orlver catches him by the shoulder and steps forward himself. He walks all the way up to George, so they are inches apart. Once again, George remains unflinching, staring slightly up at Orlver, straight into the whites of his eyes. I draw the line at being exiled off my own ship. If it weren't for this damned fiend, Windhaven would be in the past, not but a distant memory. Perhaps I wasn't your perfect hetman, George, but I don't deserve this. It doesn't seem like Estrid can stop herself from letting out a frustrated, surprised laugh. Don't deserve this. Do you not remember what we just saw you kill the Dyer? Do you not understand that if we were not for that, none of us would be here to begin with? Oliver, all of this is your fault, and you have taken no responsibility for it. She takes a moment looking at the deck before looking back at him. That is not a failing of a hetman or even a Thorwaller. That is a failing of common decency. Regardless of what you think you deserve, we do not deserve you. Oliver says nothing but looks around at the 30-odd people who are now silently judging him. He takes a step back. In the dim light, you see a flicker of recognition as he looks from face to face. Just a flicker. For just a moment. With the light is concealed by a cloud and is gone. May I say something? Darksong's voice is the most calm and collected voice you have heard all evening. She steps away from the mast, near to Oliver and George, and looks around at all of you in turn. I know I am not the most popular person here, but I do know Oliver's mind. I've told you this already, Estrid. Were in his actions right? Undoubtedly not. But we have all seen what drove him to them now. Consider that. Consider that what we are compelled to do by those who have power over us, whether we know it or not. Desperation may make us all do terrible things, but that does not mean we are beyond redemption. And if you exile Oliver now, you will only rob him of his chance. A quiet follows Darksong's speech, but you see heads turn as people consider what she says. George, though, continues to stare with full focus at Orlver, and now he nods, taking the decision on himself. All those in favor of letting Orlver to support guardrail. Those against to starboard. Those who do not care to vote to the mast. A lot of people, including you, move simply to show that they are still making up their minds. George storms back to the port side where Estrid and Swafneld stay. Maidner, Darksong, Gunner, and Orva are all moved to the starboard side along with a handful of others. It doesn't take you long to realize that yours will be one of the deciding votes. In fact, not one person abstains, and you are left standing alone between two groups of very similarly sized people. In that same moment, a series of questions crosses your mind. Most pressing of all, how do you actually feel? I think... Why am I the tiebreaker? First of all, I am an outsider in all of this Thorwaller business, so why am I even... First of all, why am I even involved in the voting of this ship's future when I'm literally only on this ship until the Fiend thing is settled? I don't know, I mean the Beam is gonna stand the shit out. I don't know. Okay, we'll just... Yeah, I know, I can't get a neutral response this time. I have to actually decide. Damn it. Hold on. Hold on. Where is... Wonder if I still have it. Oh, I do. Okay, well, my D&D Dice app has spoken. Exile. You go with your gut and walk over to the port side of the ship. Gunner's reaction is the first one you see. It breaks your heart, just a little bit. You aren't sure he is surprised, but you do know he feels as though he has failed. Next to him, Orville's expression has turned to gloomy acknowledgement. He looks from person to person opposite him, his eyes coming to rest on you. There's a spark of recognition in his eyes again, a realization that something has to change. Too little, too late. Very well. Of course it is George who steps forward to take command of the situation again. You note that it wouldn't come as a surprise to see him put his own name forward for the position of head person. He looks satisfied is the wrong word, relieved at the result, perhaps. We respect the majority as always. When we make for landfall, Orville will go his own way. From then on, you are no longer a welcome member of our Odajasko. Another silence follows. George breaks it by starting his way back below deck, and over the course of the next few moments, many follow. Oliver remains, watching them pass as they go. Very few people return his gaze, and you think he picks up on that. It makes you begin to wonder maybe there is hope for him. Elsewhere, if he can start again. Ashford not only meets Oliver's gaze, but slowly walks straight up to him, watching every movement he makes. Unsure of what might happen, you shadow her, and the three of you are left alone. I hope it is understood, Oliver. If you cannot be trusted as a member of this Odajasko, then you cannot be trusted in the fight against the Fiend. We will hunt it without you. No, no, no. The glimmer of focus on Oliver's eyes gives you an idea. A risk? Maybe, but the ultimate test. No, he should come with us. That is the only way we will know for certain whether he is truly lost. Estrid considers you for a long moment and then considers him. He silently watches you both, no longer interjecting, waiting for his fate to be decided for him. Fine, one last chance. I suggest you don't waste it. With that, she is gone, striding away as if that will magically put everything behind her. You follow a few moments behind her. You don't have the heart to add anything else. The Fiend has already exhibited such great power over you all, and you can't help but wonder whether you missed a trick. For all of its individual torments, now it has managed something on a completely different level. The pot has been simmering and bored the Keen Wolf so many weeks it is now threatening to boil over. Right at the lip, right when you need it not to. Perhaps that is the Fiend's greatest weapon of all, the power to make you all tear yourselves apart. The power to make you all tear each other apart. What else needed it really do? You know, I have not yet talked to the Fiend in any of these choices. So I feel like I should go and talk to the Fiend this time. Maybe see if anything exciting happens, I guess. Unable to sleep, you cast your mind back to the moment everything in your life changed. Chapter Shadows of the Past. Your eyes flick open at the bulkhead, groaning as the Keen Wolf passes over another wave. This wave seems stronger. It tips you sideways just a little more than the last, sends your hammock swinging just a little more. Perhaps it is just in your head. You think you've been lying awake for hours, but it might also have been mere moments. With no hint of moon or sunlight eking into the cabin, you have no way of knowing how much time has passed. All you know is that you can't sleep, even though every fiber of your being tells you are tired. Every time you close your eyes, you are brought back to some terrifying paralysis. An echo of a sad, frustrated tone and confused, crushing tears. You think you know this memory. You know it, but you don't know why. All of a sudden, you find it so difficult a memory to shake. Why was this you saw when the thunder struck and the fiend howled in your ear? It should be behind you, the last thing on your mind. Darksong. You crane your neck up so you can look around for any sign of Darksong. You've rarely seen her use her hammock since she came aboard, but she is using it now. She is incredibly well postured and balanced in the hammock to be asleep, but her eyes are closed. Perhaps she is meditating or trying to pretend to be asleep. No, you can't bring yourself to drag yourself out of the hammock. You are, for this moment, alone. And unable to sleep as you are, you must stew in it or find some other way to distract yourself. You aren't sure why, but you find yourself thinking about the song Darksong hummed not too long ago. You pluck it from your memories easier than any spell ritual you have ever memorized, and for a while you can focus on that. It is a smooth melody, and it brings a calm about you that helps you clear your mind. And soon, in your mind and the same infinite forest. You follow the urge building your chest to head for the mountains. It is a biting cold and a difficult walk over snow-covered brush and fallen branch. But despite that, you have found respite, even peace. This is how life is meant to be. And then you open your eyes. There's a lot of chatter around the gardens as students and teachers go this way and that. It isn't easy, but the gardens are small and noise does not have to travel far. Your eyes flick up towards the double doors opposite you as you play with your fingernails. Still, it is not Zahir. Nerves boil up inside your stomach and you take a deep breath as you look back down at your hands. You cannot remember a time you were so nervous. Not in any of your 9 years at the cannot say that. Chime al Panjastra? You wish that anyone else in the gardens looked as nervous as you feel, but no. For them, life goes on as it always has. Everyone is content, making progress. Everyone. Except you. Finally, when the double doors open again, it is Zahir. He looks around for a few moments before he sees you and begins to make his way around the gardens. It is still a few painstakingly long moments before he arrives, as small as each of his steps are. Hello, Nadim. It is still a few moments before he arrives, as small as each of his steps. Okay, how are you today? I am well. You try to hide your nerves behind a smile. I have been studying, preparing for the exam again. I think I am making progress. You are cut off by a heavy sigh from your teacher. You bow your head and watch him stroke his brow and thought out of the corner of your eye. You've seen that expression so many times before that you know what it means. Zahir is tired and frustrated. At you. I wish to talk to you about that if we could, Nadim. Your mind is already racing. You can tell from Zahir's tone that whatever he has got to say is not good. But he seems to be having difficulty putting it into words. The reason for his hesitation dawns on you, and you nod as you continue to pick at your nails nervously. You are expelling me, aren't you? Zahir sighs heavily again, turning in his seat slightly to look at you. We all know that you are working very hard and have a lot of determination, and we all know that you are committed to your studies, but there are only so many times we can tread the same waters. The first pang of sadness hits you before he even says it, and you curl your fists to try to keep yourself steady. We cannot keep trying to do the same thing over and over again and expect the results to be different. It would be madness. You nod your understanding, but tears come to your eyes. The truth is you don't understand. You have always been a good student, committed, determined, knowledgeable, but every time you prepare to take your final examination over the last year, you have failed. And you don't know why. The environment, the pressure, the damned pressure, it gets to you every time. Please, let me try one more time. One more time. I promise I will try not to fail again. If we had any confidence that you would succeed, we would not be having this discussion, Nadim. As unfortunate as it is simply too late. We don't know what else we can do for you. It is simply time that we all face facts. He gives you a stern look to make sure you understand he means you as well. Some people are simply not cut out to pass these exams, and if you cannot pass these exams, you cannot safely be a mage. You can feel the overwhelming sense of heartbreak coming before uncontrollable tears begin to fall. You try your best to keep your composure, but it is too difficult. There is a growing sense of anger and frustration behind the disappointment. You've given 9 years of your life, your childhood, to this academy. This cannot be how it ends. I'm sorry, Nadim. Next to you, Zahir stands up and turns to face you again. His eyes are still full of remorse. You cannot keep failing. Please be sure to collect up your possessions and leave the academy by morning. And good luck in whatever comes next for you. Your inner anger only becomes more explosive as he walks away, and more tears come to your eyes. Zahir doesn't look back. You are left on your own in the gardens, glancing around at others who are nearby. There are many sorry faces. Faces of those who saw this moment coming. Hot, fiery tears roll down your cheek as a new kind of pain rips through you. Humiliation at being the last person to know your own fate. Not just Zahir, but the entire academy has abandoned you without any hint of what you should do next. And you know you do not deserve it. As you sit there, trying not to let anger boil over into anything more than tears and trembling, you realize something. You are not alone. The fiend perches next to you in its mocking form, enjoying every moment of your suffering. Many weeks from now, you will be turned away from the Runa Jasko too. What is it about you, Nadim? Enough. You were not good enough. That anger, that frustration, it only proves it, Nadim. Why were you so furious with them? Be quiet. All around you, a thunderous chuckle rolls out across the clear blue sky, tearing down all of your defenses. And you wonder what would happen if you returned. As Zahir rounds the courtyard by the gardens, back towards the closed doors, he is approached by a student. The look of concern falls from his face as he listens to the student's question. He nods and laughs, falling into comfortable conversation with them. Pain rips through you as you watch. Where was that patience for you? How were you supposed to learn when there was always so much pressure? What hurts more, Nadim? The hatred you harbor for this place, or the pain of knowing you cannot go back? I could pass that exam now. You look the twisted form of your old mentor dead in the eyes and spit through gritted teeth. You look back at the double doors as you nod. You could prove everyone at the academy wrong now that you've had some time on the road. Even if only to spite them. You hear the sound of the double doors opening and your eyes flick up towards watch them. Without so much as a glance in your direction, Zahir follows the student through them and out of sight. You are left with nothing but the growing sense of your own discomfort, and the fiend to gloat over your shoulder about it. If only you could have done something. People say better late than never, but for you that just isn't true. Now it is just too late for you. I know. Your shout must be heard all throughout the gardens. Don't you understand? I know. The thunderous, monstrous laughter returns, tearing through you as it always has and always will. I understand it perfectly, Nadim. No one can run forever. You blink as you awaken to twilight, shaking your head as you catch your breath. For a brief moment, you scramble around, wondering where you are and how you got here. Take good care, Outlander. It's all right. Your heart is racing and your breathing is sharp and wild, but as your eyes adjust to the light, you slowly begin to calm. And then you see Esther standing over you with a furrowed brow. Is everything all right? Just a dream, I think. A bad dream. You too. That seems to be spreading. You pull yourself up so that you can turn and plant your feet on the relative steadiness of the deck. Estrid gives you plenty of space, holding out a hand as if she expects you to collapse. We all had a difficult night. You look around, and what few raiders are still in the commons are all tired and morose. What time is it? The sun is only just beginning to rise, but it is at least sunrise. But it is at least the last sunrise we'll see aboard the Keen Wolf before our quest comes to an end. You give Estrid a quizzical look as you stretch and yawn. Come. Gunnar has told us to prepare for landfall. Phew. Yeah, that's saving it. Take a drink. Okay. After weeks at sea, the crew of the Keen Wolf arrive back on the Thorwall coast, just north of this vessel, and Gunnar puts you to work setting up camp. Chapter Landfall. With a gentle thud and a slight shake, the Scuda finally crunches into something other than water. You glance up at the sky and are greeted by a wall of gray where the sky used to be. There's definitely another storm of one kind or another coming. Still, no one around you seems in a particular rush to leap off the Scuda and start setting up the camp. Everything is far calmer, if only by pretense, than that. There is home territory. There is no need for scouting or patrols. The only dangers are the sea and the fiend. The first, the Thorwallers know well. The second, you all accept you can do very little to stop. One by one, you trudge out onto the beach. The moment you step foot onto the sand, it starts to give way under your weight. Outlander, Hetling, help us out here. The raiders still with an oar in her hand, beckons you both over to help push the boat back into the water. With that, she and her rowing partner sit down facing you and start rowing back towards the distant Keen Wolf. Slightly further behind them, the second scoot is coming in your direction with a small set of camping supplies from the cargo hold. It's going to be a long afternoon for the rowers, going back and forth to ensure that the Ojasco is prepared to camp. I am very glad to be off that ship, if only for a little while. It could not come soon enough. Esther chuckles beside you, her eyes locked into the cog as she folds her arms. That may as well be it now, Outlander. This place is only a few miles down the coast. We could walk back home when this is all over, if we survive it. She takes a moment looking at the second scooter fighting its way to shore and the 4 people who came with you to the beach. The idea was that on each trip, a group of people would take a set of the camping supplies and start setting up. Estrid, though, looks at you and tilts her head towards the dunes that separate the beach from the countryside. Come with me for a moment. And with that, she is off, walking as quickly as she can through the sand to get to the dunes. You help each other climb up the steep, craggy slopes. Only when you are at the top do you realize why you have been dragged up here. These mountains, these woodlands, those gently rolling hills. You cannot be more than an hour away from where the Peaceless attacked you, and this whole thing began. Of course, the environment has changed. It's colder, and the snow looks as though it started falling some days ago. And with those black clouds hanging over your head, you are now certain that more is on the way. And none of it takes away from the staggering realization that you have come full circle now. What if you just left, right now? Packed our bags, headed back to this vessel today, and forgot all about this. You both stand and look over at the world that has been swept over by snow. A gentle tug in the back of your mind draws your eyes to the distant peaks of the Halder Mountains. As soon as you rest your eyes there, you feel the hole that has taken up refuge in your stomach for so long start to move. Part of you wants to run, back to the boat, back to the Keen Wolf, as far west as west goes. The rest of you knows that you can't run, not even back to... And you certainly cannot forget. Not if you ever want to be rid of that feeling. You know, it gets even better, Outlander. A direct path to where we are being drawn will lead us straight past Jolvik. You can't help but snort out a laugh. Perhaps it was fate, then, that we ended up there to begin with. Estrid snorts herself and spends a moment looking at the floor before staring back at the mountain. Maybe. Hey! Behind you, the voice rings out, and you both turn to look at the dunes. Are you coming to help us or not? The scoot is here. A quick glance confirms that is true, and the person who came to collect you doesn't wait around for you to join him. Together, you and Estrid carefully lower yourselves back to the beach. It is just a short walk back to where this water sloshes up in small waves on the sand. For the first time, you take a proper look into the second scooter to get an idea of camping supplies. Thick cotton-like material blankets and wooden stick supports make up the tents. There are bedrolls too, though not enough for everyone. But this scooter contains none of these things. They will come later. The first delivery to the beach is a collection of wood stakes, almost as long as the boat itself. These have been shaved and worked down to a point at the top and rounded off at the bottom. And with some length, and with them comes lengths and lengths of thick, stringy rope. He had seen it all down the Keemel's cargo hold, but never clicked until now what it was for. Is this a palisade of sorts? It is more of a fence than a palisade. Up and down the Thorwallian coast, you'll find Odaskins, small permanent settlements specifically for Odajaskos. They use walls like these to help protect them from the wilderness. It has been one of the great benefits of the Keen Wolf. We can take an Oskin on extended raids, and the walls help to protect us against the enemy too. It takes 2 people to drag each log stake onto the beach. They are lined up tightly together on top of 3 of the ropes, which are then tied around the stakes to secure them. It does get easier as more and more of the crew are ferried to the beach from the Keen Wolf, but it still takes hours, and the sky is much darker by the time you start lifting the walls up to make a ring. With the last of the wall pieces up, the scooters also start delivering what you need to put the tents up. They're packed very closely together inside the ring, and space inside each tent is just as limited. It will be difficult to sleep comfortably, of that you are sure, but you're still glad to be sleeping on solid ground again. The first bits of sleet start to fall as you are helping to tie the last wall piece together. This section of the wall is left as a separate part of the puzzle. It functions as a hidden door into the campsite, the Odiskin. It is all quite ingenious, really, you think, as the site stands completed before you. Considering the life that this Ojaska leads, you wouldn't have expected them to be capable of something quite so stable. Knowing that you must do next, you find this ability a little comforting and needed. As if before everything falls into chaos, you will have a moment of respite, just for a little while. The weather turns within the hour, and many of the raiders take shelter in the tents now that they're up. A storm on solid ground feels manageable now after the chaos of the Alkenfessel and the return journey. You are, without a doubt, the coldest you've ever been, but Maynard lends you his cloak to use for extra warmth. The last ferry to the beach is the one that draws the most attention. This is the schooner that has Orlver and Gunner aboard. Darksong has traveled with them, having spent most of the day with Orlver. Those still there to see them will all arrive, stop, and stare. After the boats, those who went over exiled feared he might try to get out of it or delay it. They worried he'd rather lock himself in his quarters and die there than leave. For them, then, this was the moment of truth. Of course, you know that he won't be gone for good, at least not yet. It's hard to imagine that he will stay with the Josco. More likely he will find somewhere to stay on his own for the night. Every eye follows as he trudges up the beach, trying to avoid catching anyone looking at him. He cuts a truly lonely figure, a little more than a silhouette staggering through the sand and the rain and the snow. He walks past the Otterskin and away to the east a little, off to shelter under the dunes. There he will stay, you think, until the time comes to face the fiend and you collect him. Your gaze is pulled away by the sight of Darksong walking directly towards you, clutching her pack tightly. Her expression is even more grim than usual as she tries to shield her face from the storm. I'll be on my way now. I put it up as long as I could, but there's something here that I need to do. Otherwise, I don't know if I'll get a chance again. Where are you going? Home, hopefully. She sees the quizzical look you give her and manages a small chuckle. I know, but what I didn't know is that there is something here that can help me. If I don't try now, I might not get another chance. She takes a long look over your shoulder in the direction of Oliver and walked off in. You already have enough broken pieces walking into this fight. That is for the best. I just wanted to say farewell, and good luck in the fight to come. That can't just be it. You are part of this other Joska. You said you would help us, and I am trying to do just that. Even in the storm, you see the tears start to bead in her eye, though she wipes it away quickly. Take it as a measure of elven wisdom. With time, you come to realize when it is better to walk away from a fight. Before you can argue, she seems to realize that this is not enough explanation, raises her hands. If I go to face with the fiend and it asserts to get more control over my mind, I do not know what might happen. There is every possibility that it might turn me against you, even without me realizing it. That helps no one. I cannot fight the fiend as I am now, and I cannot stay behind any longer. I have to do this. She looks at you for a long moment and then readjusts her grip on her pack and bows her head to you. Good luck. I really mean that. Without another word, she slips past you and trudges off towards the dunes. You know you should follow her. There's nothing else set to happen before the day comes to an end. A hunting party may set out to find something fresher to eat. But the decision is already made that tomorrow will be the day you set out to find the fiend. No, you should follow her. You want her to be there for the fight. Perhaps it is not too late to convince her to join you. If you can find out where she is going first. Whew. Alright, we'll save again. Upon arrival on the shore of the Thorwall, your elven companion is determined to leave the Josko behind. Wanting her to stay and fight, you follow her. Away with the fairies. Take a deep breath in and start on your way up to Darksong. Lighter on her feet, she is able to make her way across the storm-soaked sand quicker than you can. Through the storm, you can see her looking back towards the Otterskin either. Her arms are folded to keep her cloak up around her, and her head is down against the snow. It is up to you whether or not you want to run after her to confront her directly or follow from a distance. Run. You try to quicken your pace, exerting more energy to make your way through the sludge beneath your feet. Still, you won't reach her before she reaches the dunes, which means running across the countryside too. You clamber up the dunes as quickly as you can, conscious all the while of Darksong's advantage. As soon as you reach the top, you squint through the snow and to try and make out her silhouette. It's hard enough without the wind buffeting you about you as well. But there, a few dozen paces ahead of you. Fighting her way through the snow that still lay heavy on the Thorwallian landscape even before the storm hit. You can just see her outline, huddled up tightly, still heading due north as steadily as she can. You set off after her at a jog. You keep a hand tighter on the hem of your cloak to keep yourself warm as you go. A few, albeit long, weeks ago, you were running over the same countryside with Estrid and Rasker. That was nothing compared to this. With sleet and snow slashing down on you and more thrown up by your feet as you go, it is hard work. You are constantly looking down to avoid difficult steps. Constantly looking back up to make sure you are not losing track of Darksong. But even though you are still struggling for breath, you are catching up. In fact, not long after, she stops and turns, having heard you coming up behind her, even through the storm. What are you doing? You said you wanted to make up for the secrecy, Darksong. Now is the time. Even through the storm, you see Darksong give you a slightly hurt look. It was a little bit of a low blow, considering that what she taught you, but you stand by it. You won't change my mind. I just wish to understand what is going on. Is that really so much to ask? Your words only draw a blank stare back from the elf. The cold starts to eat away at you as the two of you stare at each other, but Darksong only shakes her head in the end. This is for the best. With that, she turns and continues northwards. You stare after her, unsure whether to be confused or just annoyed. Both of those feelings strengthen your resolve to follow her, though, and so you continue on. The storm finally relents after a couple more hours, which makes it far easier to see where you are going. You've already been going for miles, and once again you find yourself striding over field and fen to reach uncertainty. All the while, Darksong has been quiet beside you. To begin with, you didn't try to start conversation. It was soon very clear that she had no interest in it. When the storm has passed completely, you start to recognize exactly where you are. You walked across the road some time ago that you now recognize the very same one you were ambushed upon. The goal, you begin to think, must be the forest that cushioned Jalvik from the mountains. The very same one you snuck through in order to reach the peaceless camp unseen. I know this place. Despite her reluctance, you decide to spark up conversation again. I came here before I came aboard the Keen Wolf. There's an abandoned village east of that forest up ahead. That was my first real fight, a day before the fiend struck for the first time. You really should go back to the camp. Following me is not going to be worth it. Well, this is clearly important to you. That makes it worth it. Once again, Darksong stops short. Without the storm, it is far easier to see the forlorn look on her face as she turns to you. She quickly stops and bites her lip on whatever she was about to say. She takes a look at the trees coming up quickly towards you as nightfall creeps closer. Do you know what Ladifari are? She looks at you patiently while she awaits your response. In that moment, at least, you're grateful for your teachings at the academy. Fairies, yes. I read about them once. Yes. If there's any creature more in tune with magic than elves, it is them. There is a glade in that forest that belongs to them. That is where I am going. You can't help but scowl as you look toward the very same darkening woods. It isn't the fact that such things really exist, or even that they exist here, that bothers you. It's why Darksong would be searching for them. Now, why? When you look back to Darksong, you're staring in the same direction. I felt the pull of the place when we came ashore. If there's any magic in the world that can help me, it is probably theirs. Seemingly buoyed by the idea, she surges forward again. You follow after her, albeit far less hastily. Night falls as you make your way through the woods. It's hard to believe that this is the same woods you jogged through when striking Jalvik. The plant life is thick and untamed. The trees are old and grow tall overhead. The snow makes it difficult to go anywhere without making a sound. Every step you take gives a soft crunch underfoot. There is the occasional snap as you press down too hard on a branch or twig. With all the sounds of the night and nowhere from Darksong next to you, it only serves to raise the tension. And if that weren't bad enough, the cold is still eating away at you. As evening stretches on, you could do start to part, and that at least makes it easier to see. At a different time and different circumstances, you might even consider the view beautiful. And even if there is no murkiness about the forest itself, there is still eeriness lingering in the air. Darksong leads the way forwards quietly. She never stops once to check her direction. It is like she is being drawn forwards ever deeper into the woods. You must already be clambering over the real roots of the mountain. The way is far from level. Unless you are mistaken, you are heading slightly northwestwards now, right into the heart of the forest. It's quite quiet here. Speaking into that kind of quiet feels like it might bring some terrible curse down upon you. Indeed, for a long moment, Darksong does not respond, as if she's waiting to see whether your voice will call some powerful creature out of the darkness. I would say peaceful, if I felt remotely at peace. That is the effect of the fairies. They bring peace with them. While they are here, the only unrest we will find in this place is our own. Your mind alight with questions. You do not manage to keep something for very long now that it has been broken. How do you imagine they will help exactly? There is not a long moment for any reply becomes, in which you can only sit in your own discomfort. Again, you see a puff of vapor rise up into the air behind Darksong's hood. Have you ever heard the term Bodok before? I don't think so. What does it mean? Not once does Darksong look back at you as you continue on your way together. I've spent decades among humans now. I've cheated, I've lied, I've thieved. We see life and death as a balance to be cats, but I have killed so many people and saved none. I don't feel like an elf anymore. I was turned into a monster. I was robbed of what my life was supposed to be. When I think about going home, her voice breaks and rattles in that last word. Still, she doesn't look back. As I am now, I have no place among my people. That is a bad luck. I cannot go back as long as I remember everything I've done and everything I've been forced to do, and that is the only place I can stay safe. I need the fairy to help me forget, and then I need to run. Then I might actually find some peace. Quiet falls on you with that. It feels wrong to speak straight away. Only once the relative quiet is broken by a shuddering breath of release in front of you. You really are that desperate. You would be too. It is bad enough that I have been living through this nightmare for so long, but for it to be doubled by the fiend's torment too. I've had enough. You have seen inside my mind, so you know what lives there. That is not who I want to be. I want my life back. Again, it feels wrong to say anything, until you see her move a hand underneath her hood to rub at the side of her neck. Forgetting it all will not make it any less real. It will be far less real to me. Her arm falls back to her side now. Finally, she glances back in your direction to snap at you. That's all that matters now. You continue on in silence after that. Darksong seems content with this. You, however, grow ever more unsure. Many questions still flit across your mind. All of them more and more inappropriate with every passing moment. And there is no going back now, so you must simply carry on in silence. That is, until Darksong finally stops short in front of you. The rush ahead seems particularly thick here, and it is difficult to see past it. But as you squint, you see tiny lights dancing on the leaves that block your path. They flit around much like your own thoughts, appearing and disappearing in hues of green and blue and red. And a new sound plays on your ears, echoing strangely. Harmonious, even childish laughter. The lights start off Darksong's love as she lifts it to the leaves, only to appear again heartbeats later. We're here. Come on. As you push yourself through the thick brush and into the glade, you blink at the sudden change of light. Suddenly you can see clearly, and more than that, the world you step into is beyond beautiful. Your eyes are drawn first to the face of white light that hangs suspended just off the woodland floor at the far end of the clearing. It shines brightly, illuminating the space and sending harsh shadows reeling off the surrounding trees and bushes. Bushes, not brushes. Sad. Oh my god. But it ripples too, like wind on water, calm and tranquil, as if something is passing through it at a constant speed. Each ripple sends notes of light soaring slowly through the air, like they are carried on the very same breeze. They shimmer as they float along towards the ground, revolving through every possible color as they go. And then they splash across like water, breaking apart into minute bubbles that flash, burn, and die. And the flowers that bloom in the glade are unlike any you have ever seen before. They are brighter, richer, wilder than the trees and bushes that surround you, full of strange color that shouldn't be. It is staggering, but your eyes are quickly taken by the sight of a person no larger than your hand, leaping from the petal of such a plant. They flit upwards on translucent wings to join their brethren in the air, laughing in a joyful, youthful laugh. You can't help but smile as two more flash across your vision, driving around one of the motes of light like hawks. One of them stops itself, hovering in the air as their wings flit so quickly you lose track of them. An elf! And a human! They flit over to you slowly, their heads tilting slightly as they look at you curiously. Welcome. Thank you. As you marvel at the sight of it, the fairy flutters down to eye level with Darksong. You are here with great purpose. My name is Durandil. What are your names? Every sentence they speak is excited and joyful, as if everything in the world is new. I'm Nadim. You stop, glancing towards Darksong, as you realize you don't know how you should complete your introduction. Her misery doesn't seem much lessened by the beauty of this place. She stares at Durandil, holding her gaze for as long as she can before she has to look at the floor. Durandil cocks her head again, flying over closer to her face. I see. There's a distinct change in the fairy's voice. All around you, the motes of light in the air turn an icy cold blue. You cannot speak your name because it does not belong to you. You cannot bear the sound of it. Disheartening presses on your chest. You see a tear spring from Darksong's eye. The light dims and the color turns to a pale, dying gray. Darksong is my name. Durandil seems to ignore the response, flitting ever closer towards her. They put a minuscule hand to one of the scars that crawls up Darksong's neck, and she flinches violently. The glade turns a bright durning red in the heartbeat before Durandil flits back up and away from the elf. I see. Darksong. It's all right. Even as she shudders again, Darksong turns to you, wrapping her hood around her neck. I need them to understand. I see. I do understand. The light slowly fades back to its multicolored, multifaceted brilliance, and you look towards Darksong again. Terrible pain. Gone in any sense of joy from Durandal's voice. That is why you've come. You look across at Darksong, watching as she wraps her hood around her neck to hide her scars. She starts to say something, then stops and simply looks at Durandal flittering in front of her. But then she nods. I need to forget. More than that, I need it all gone from my mind. I need it destroyed. Can you do that? Durandal is so small and so inhuman that it is nigh on impossible to read their expression. They seem to consider Darksong, their tiny wings flitting rapidly behind them. After a painfully long moment, they do reply. Yes, but it will change you. You need to be certain. You look across at Darksong, trying to highlight the importance of your words. The human is right. Durandal drops towards the ground, landing on a pedal that bounces underneath their weight. You must be certain. Besides you, Darksong clenches her fist tightly as she thinks. More tears well in her eyes, and you see her eyes ball closed, as if the memories are playing on her mind. I have to. I won't keep going as I am. Have you considered trying to fight whatever you are running from? Ending this once and for all. That is so much easier said than done. She looks at you with a mix of anger and sadness. You don't know. You don't want to know. Just trust me, there is no winning that fight. Her arms tighten. Her fingers are clenched so tightly around her hood now that you think she might have trouble breathing. Again, she trembles and closes her eyes as tears fall down her cheek. I can't keep going as I am. I can't. It's been so long, and it hurts so much. Unless I do this, I will never be free of that. She grits her teeth and positively spits through them with anger and conviction. I don't deserve that. I don't. You still won't be free of it, Darksong. You might think it less real to you, but whatever trouble you face will still be out there, and that just makes it easier to fall back into it later. That she has no answer to. Her expression twists into an annoyed, conflicted mess, and then she turns away from you. She finally releases her hood, though, keeping a tight grip on her arms instead. You take the small break in the conversation to look around. Durandal is still nearby, hopping from one pedal to another as they wait for a final decision. A posture check. I'm already sitting straight, but thank you. Other fairies flit about too, though the childlike laughter from before has died down now. You turn back to Darksong, who is glowering as she paces around in a small circle. You're scared. She shoots a dark look at you, but you continue forward with your argument. I don't know what it is you are getting through, but I do understand that. The fiend has made all of us confront ourselves. It has been equally terrifying every time it has struck. But I am still here, and you are still here, after even longer. I am not still here. The real me died decades ago. Darksong absent-mindedly rubs at the scar on the right side of her neck while she thinks. I was never meant to be a killer. I was a craftswoman. I was happy and at peace, just as you were before the fiend. What if you could be free of that? You hear her voice crack with desperation as she wipes away another tear. The fiend haunts us with what is already... Oh, crap. I hit that too hard. Ugh. Okay. I have stretched, and I hydrated a moment ago. Trust me, with all this reading, I'm hydrating a lot. What if it isn't there? What if that is the escape? You freeze at that. You can't deny it is tempting. It may even be worth trying if there were any way to know in advance if it would work. But then reality sets in, you know that it is a fantasy. I still failed my exams, Darksong. I still disappoint the people who spent years trying to teach me. I could go back to Pentagram Academy not knowing that, and they would be the first to remind me. Just as you still have your scars. They won't disappear just because you don't remember where they came from. After that, she stops pacing and stops rubbing her arms to glance down at them. All you can do now is wait to see whether she will change her mind. She stands and stares at her gloved arms for what seems like a long while. After that, she rubs the scar on the left side of her neck, her eyes bulge shut. You hear her groan as both arms finally fall back to her sides. It will be a disaster. Even if we survive the fiend, if I don't do this, I will either have to go back or there will be chaos. Wherever I go. That is a matter of fact, but I have enjoyed these weeks of peace so much. I do not want to go back. One thing at a time. First, we need to survive the fiend. Then we can worry about what comes next. She looks at you cautiously, looks at the floor for a moment, and then nods. Durandal. Durandal zips up from where they were sitting, hovering at Darksong's height. Darksong gives him a soft, sad smile. I am sorry for wasting your time. Don't be sorry. You just about see the fairy give a shrug of their arms and shoulders. You needed this. That makes it worth it. You cannot be sure, but you think Dorinda smiles, and Darksong laughs as she wipes more tears away. Dorinda flies backwards so that they can turn to you both in turn. We will give you some peace. Good luck. The fairy snaps her tiny fingers together. The sound of it makes it much louder than it should be. You stagger backwards, blinking in surprise. You blink again as your eyes adjust to new levels of light. The strange otherworldly flowers still sit on the grassy floor, albeit much darker than they were. But the face and motes of light, the ethereal colors, and the fairies themselves are all vanished. Without them, the air lies still and joyless. The night seems empty and devoid of life. Next to you, Darksong takes another deep breath, looking around the clearing and then at you. I'm sorry to you as well. None of this is really your concern. I didn't want for you to be dragged into it. I followed you here. If anything, I should be apologizing for that. Darksong gives a soft chuckle, but doesn't reply. She reaches down and opens the pouch at her belt, fishing around inside it for a moment. She pulls out the figurine you've seen her working on so often, holding it in her palm. You weren't sure where she found the time to complete it, but you can see that it has been. Where before the edges were still sharp and blocky, now everything has been smooth and detailed. A tiny elven form in a dancing pose stood on a small circular base. With a heavy breath, Darksong wraps her fingers around it tightly in a form of embrace. Even if I went home, it would not be the same. Very gently, she sets the figurine down, balancing it carefully on the top of one of the otherworldly flowers. After a couple of small adjustments, it lies there perfectly still, and Darksong closes her eyes. Rest now in peace, Valaria. As close to home as you can be. With that, she stands back up again, rubbing the inside of her arms as she turns to you. We should return to the camp. Tomorrow is already going to be long enough without all of this. It isn't the first time I have tracked across these hills. If we hurry, we might still make it back before dawn. I will find us a quicker route to take. Come on. Phew! Alright, save. On the eve before you set out to face the fiend, one more vision comes to you in your dreams, unlike any you have seen before. Blessing in disguise. Your eyes flutter open, struggle to adjust to the dark twilight of the night. All is quiet inside the makeshift tent. You can't have been asleep for very long. You don't remember much past bringing Darksong back to the Odyskin and collapsing down on your bedroll. You don't feel tired, though. You feel strangely refreshed, though an aura of nervousness and fear still hangs heavy over you. As you look at those breathing quietly around you, the strange sensation comes over you. You never used to remember your dreams, but the arrival of the fiend in your life changed that. Night after night after night on your journey back into Thorwall from Nostria, it has been the same. So it is odd now to feel the memory of whatever you had seen in your most recent dream slip away from you. It is an unexpected return to normality right at the end. Rubbing your eyes, you take a sharp breath in, already wondering whether you might be able to get back to sleep. But a distant smell catches it in your nose, the charcoal sting of smoke. All of your senses whir into action at once as you take another deeper breath of it, and your heart and mind race as you scramble onto your feet, pushing your way out of the tent quickly. And you immediately stagger to a halt again as you see the world around you. Not the beach, not even the Thorwallian shore. Your heart skips a beat as you see the burning buildings all around you. As your lungs are grasped by the soot and the ash, and your skin roils with the heat of the flames. Windhaven. The fiend has caught you in its grasp again, you are certain of it. And this time with no hint of its coming. Just to twist a dagger deeper into your soul to prove that you really do not stand a chance at all. No, that's wrong. You weren't sure how you know. It doesn't feel the same as it has before. Not in the subtle way it felt at the end of the raid. This feels completely different. You feel at peace in this place of chaos and destruction. As if a hole in your heart has been magically refilled. This isn't the fiend. This is something else. Outlander. You weren't aware that she was there, but now you see Estra in the corner of your eye and turn to face her. She looks as confused as you now, realizing that whatever this is some new menace. I thought I was awoken from a dream. At the thought of it, you turn to see if the tent you emerged from is still there. It isn't, replaced by the stump of a tree that is dry and cracked in the heat of the fire. Hey, I was having a wonderful dream. I was somewhere I'd never been before, far to the south, I think. It's not as loud as it was the last time the fiend brought you here. You hear the crackling fires and you smell the ash on the air. But now you are out of the tent. The smell is not as strong as it was before, and the sound is strangely muted. Quiet enough for you to hear a whisper past your ear, away from the street you find yourselves on. And away past the burning houses, you hear the echo of cheers and cries. You and Estra both look at each other after the whisper and the echo have faded. You both feel the urge to walk that way, pulling you towards the sound that is no longer there. With a nod, you make your way forwards, already hazarding a guess for where exactly the road may lead you. You are spot on. It does not take much time to realize you are following the same steps you took towards the carnage of your last visit. Now you feel fear creeping up on you as well, and the thought of what you might find there. The stepping into the square does not bring with it the same heart-wrenching moment it did before. Indeed, to your surprise, only one person has stood there waiting for you. The blessed one that Oliver beat and tortured to death in front of you, his hands bound as they were before. He expects you to come from the direction you do, already looking at you even before your eyes meet, and his eyes follow you as you continue on the same path as last time, around the outside of the square. As if to give the phantom of Oliver, who wasn't even there, the same wide berth you gave him before. You see a calm, friendly smile across his lips as he looks away from you, though you still feel as if his eyes are on you. Hello, Estrid Ulfsgarder, and you, Nadim Sabah Duster. You are so out of sorts for a long moment you cannot bring yourself to speak. You shake your head to try to reformulate your thoughts, your questions. Why are we here? Once again, his eyes fall upon you, and you feel yourself wilting slightly. It isn't uncomfortable or fear-reducing, in fact, quite the opposite. You feel calm and relaxed, more so than in what it feels like a lifetime. You are here because fate has bound you to the creature you now face. The simplicity of his answer catches you off guard. You glance at Estrid, who is looking nervously at you as well. She tenses up as she glances back over to the figment and calls over the flames. Who are you? The blessed one seems to struggle with that question, cocking his head as he potters on it for a small while. Eventually, he looks at you both and shakes his head. I have no name as you know them. I am an ideal. Peace, I think you would call it, though it means many, many things to me. I am a servant of Travia, and I am sent to you now to talk before the end. This is a dream of sorts. As he speaks, you only seem to become more and more at one in this terrible place. With the fire still blazing around you, you feel as though you are not home. You are at home, truly at home. In the Pentagram Academy and Roshdul, where it became so apparent that one way or another you could not stay. One look at Estrid tells you that she's been affected just as much. An understanding has come across her face that you recognize. It's the same expression she has whenever you caught her staring off into the western horizon. When last Travia looked upon this place, a man who had struggled for many winters finally fell. Oliver Eriksson. In the moment she hoped his resolve would be strongest, he failed, and he has suffered for it ever since. There is very little hope for him now. We do not know all of what lies ahead of you, but we know that your fate does not have to be the same as Oliver's. Not just because we abandoned him, not if you have realized that he could not. Ashidamir changes entirely as he speaks, and she ends up lifting both hands to her mouth in silent surprise. You stumble over the words, which all make sense on their own, but take a moment to add up together. Look at the blessed one standing before you. There's something special about him, nothing divine. He is just a man, his hands bound by thick, heavy rope, who you have just seen once before, in a vision of the fiend beaten and tortured to death by Oliver. And yet his words are as if spoken by a divine power, and this feels honest, needing no proof or validation. You are one of the celestial family. You weren't certain in the moment whether that is a term you have heard before. It is a group of lesser divinities, ones that serve Travia specifically. The being nods gently, but says nothing, leaving you both to process it all alone. Will you help us? I would like to. A moment passes between the three of you, where all you hear is the dulled roar of the flames. Attention cuts into the peace and comfort as if to remind you of how important an event this is. Oliver Eriksson spent much of his life watching those around him, listening to them, letting them set expectations for his life. That is how he thought he would garner respect, a very Thorwaldian thing. But he became obsessed by it. He came to believe that he always needed more respect, admiration from his allies, and fear from his enemies. But that was not his failing. That was not realizing that in trying so desperately to garner the respect of others, he might lose his own. That this creature did not just find Oliver, it also found you. The messenger slowly turns to you and holds you in his gaze. And so I must ask you, what was your failing? Your mind is clearly alight with everything you have been through the last few weeks, everything the fiend has shown you, everything you know about how the fiend hunts. Finding the disturbances in a person's peace of mind. Finding the thing that makes someone not quite whole. You know what that is for you. The fiend has been tormenting you with it from the moment it found you. And now with what this blessed one is telling you, you have to ask yourself, is it really self-inflicted? It's not as simple as yes or no, but perhaps unintentionally it is self-inflicted, at least in part. You know now that you're capable of the things that Zahir thought you incapable of. If he had been more patient with you or changed his approach, maybe in time you would have passed his test. There is no doubt then that he and the Academy bear most of the blame for your being here. But you let their actions define you, and you let fear and anger fester without focus or release. You convinced yourself, consciously or not, that you were the problem, and that is what the fiend found. That is what it gave power over you. So was it self-inflicted? And what does that say about your failings? I blamed myself. After the Academy dismissed me, and when the runners turned me away, I blamed myself. I told myself that I had failed, and hated myself for that because I knew it wasn't true. I never once tried to convince Zahir to give me one more time, to try teaching me a different way. I never once thought that I might be able to make my own way of it. I just gave up on myself. The Blessed One observes you for a long moment, completely unmoving in stance and expression. But then he blinks and nods. Now you know. It is not a failing you should scold yourself for, Nadim. There are many reasons why your mind works the way it does, and even they are not all within your control. But it is something you should be mindful of. And it seems, now you will be. I hope that too will help against the fiend. You have come far on this journey. Just like that, it's over. You expect to feel more than just a pleasant sense of contentment come over you. By the time you have realized it was there, it is gone again, like a curt nod for your effort. The Blessed One raises his hands, and the ropes binding them fall away limply to the ground. You blink in surprise, and when you look at the Avatar again, he is holding the demon's tooth out to you. Slowly, as if to show you that he means no harm, he walks forward towards you and offers the tooth up for you to take. You have my blessing, Nadim. Use it to finish the task that fate has appointed to you. Then go forth and do what you think is best for you. Remember this contentment and hold on to it so that it stays within your grasp. His hands are outstretched, the demon's tooth is within your reach. Esther lets out a small laugh. Slowly, carefully, nervously, you stretch out to receive the gift, looking at it instead of into the Avatar's eyes. The moment your fingers clasp a dry bone of strangely cold metal, you feel a pull inside your chest. There is a blinding white light that stuns your eyes and a whistling sound that makes your ears ring. You are thrown back, out of the square, out of Windhaven, out of Aventuria. Off the face of the very world itself and into the inky, cold void. This time your eyes flash open and instinctually you shoot up so that you're sitting on your bedroll. The world around you is dim, quiet twilight. Those you share the tent with breathe softly, undisturbed by your sudden awakening. All except Eshrid, who sat up as well. She glances across at you, her expression unreadable in the darkness. And quietly she gets up, pushing her way out of the makeshift tent into the outside world. You follow as quickly as you can, carefully trying to tread so you don't wake up those around you. You're glad to step out into the beach, surrounded by the safety of the Ottiskin camp. The night breeze is gentle, but bitingly cold, and the sky is mostly clear. It's early, not quite dawn, but light is already beginning to seep into the sky. Everything is a gray haze, including Estrid, who is pacing in the open center of the camp, rubbing warmth into her hands. As soon as she sees you, she stops short and opens her arms up towards you in a questioning expression. How do you feel, Outlander? Do you feel any different than before? Oh, someone's doing fireworks already. He didn't test you. Do you feel any different? Well, no, but I thought that I might be wise. One of us needs to be able to use the tooth. As you passed your test, mine was unnecessary. She looks into the burned-out campfire. She starts massaging her hands to keep them warm again. That was like nothing I've ever experienced. Unlike anything I thought I would ever experience. It's hard to believe it is actually real. And the timing of it, we are beyond fortunate. We could have a chance now to actually do this. More than we did, at least. Maybe. Maybe we can. Estrid stays quite still as she tries to process it all, never once looking away from the remains of the fire pit. After some time, she groans to herself and rolls her eyes, and then hits herself in the forehead. Of course, it's not just you. Where's the tooth? You really realize that what she means and nod. You rush back to the tent only to realize that there are still people sleeping soundly inside. Carefully, you figure your way over to the pack, collect it up, and sneak back into the night once more. You rummage around to find the demon's tooth, even as you make your way back to the campfire. And the moment you clasp it, you know something is different. There's a tingling in your fingers that quickly crawls up your arm and seems to dissipate into the rest of your body. It isn't strange or uncomfortable. In fact, it's almost like all this time a part of you has been missing that has now suddenly returned. It is like the feeling inside the dream of completeness and wholeness. Not as strong, certainly not strong enough to fill the hole the fiend has been tearing through you, but it is enough to give you a glimmer of real hope. And you know, somehow, with full confidence, that if you were to strike the fiend with this tooth now, it would hurt. Glancing from the tooth at Estrid, you can tell she is eagerly awaiting your report. In that moment, all you can do is nod to confirm what you felt. Estrid clasps her fingers in front of her mouth in a brief moment of muted excitement. We have a chance then. We actually have a chance. She takes another few moments to enjoy the state of bliss before she becomes more serious again. What you said to the Herald, Outlander. It's important. I am still not sure I understand everything I've learned about myself on this voyage. I hope for your sake that you can hold on to that clarity. You will get there too. Perhaps not today or when all this is over, but as long as you don't forget it all. There is always hope, I suppose. It seems a strange lesson to have learned from all of this, but I hope you are right. She chuckles to herself and shakes her head, and then straightens up and points to the tooth. This is it then, Outlander. Dawn is not far off. We should make the camp now and tell any who wish to join us to prepare. She pauses, and you see that she is saying only just dawns on her now. It's finally time. Phew. Alright, save again. You're ready as you'll ever be to finally confront the fiend, rallying your allies for one final fight to face your fates. The confrontation. Together, perhaps as jubilant as you have both been since your journey began, you rouse the camp. Some of the Odajoska are deeply unhappy about being woken at such an early hour, but something unspoken creeps its way through the Odaskin. They know why you are waking them. Some are even glad that the time has finally come. In a short while, as many of the raiders as there are on the shore are packed into the center of the campsite. Some in the back are dotted between the tents, some have sat down on the sand. All of them have given the two of you a yard or so around the campfire. And they all look at you as if they expect you to rouse them to action as well as from sleep. You are the only one it seemingly all depends on. As such, Estrid looks to you to start the speech. Thank you for waking. You tried to appeal to their generosity, and hope that it might lift their spirits that just a little bit higher. This is our fight, those who have been marked by the fiend. The rest of you did not even have to come this far. Now we need your help one final time. So many eyes and ears on you at once, it is not something you are used to. But the whole Odazosko pays close attention, respectfully silent and hanging on your every word. Their reaction to your introduction is understandably muted, but you catch some nods from amongst the crowd. Nonetheless, Estrid takes a cue from the silence starting up where you left off. Something has changed. This night, the Outlander received Rabio's blessing from one of the Celestial family. I think the Demon's Tooth may work now. The Celestial family. You pick Torkel's voice of the crowd, though it is not quite light enough to see more than his outline. How do you know that this is a blessing is real, not just know the fiend's tricks? Before you can speak, Estrid gives you a look as if to say, let me handle this, Outlander. She tells her own perspective of the vision, making sure to explain to the Odajoska that she knew it was no trick. She looks at you with a touch of pride as she describes her answers to the messenger's question. The crowd is mystified but excited by it all, and you hear mutters go through the crowd as the tale comes to an end. Some of the Odajoska look at you a bit differently once it is done, with more of an air of respect than before. Before they can lose too much focus, though, you try to rally them to the point of the meeting. We will head out at dawn. Anyone who would like to help us should prepare to go then. All throughout the crowd, you watch people looking around to see who will move first. Of course, it is Flaffman who comes forward first. She strides through the crowd to the central space, looking at you all the while. When she reaches you, you see a blank stare in her eyes, even in a gray haze in the early morning. I'm with you to the end, Outlander. Come what may. Next to her, Maidner appears too, nodding sullenly. This affects me much as it affects you. It's just common decency. Words. It's just common decency to be there to see it through. For a short while, it seems as though no one else is going to step forward, but in the corner of your eye, you see another shadow gently push itself forward into the central ring. Darksong, clearly uncertain and rubbing her hands together nervously. She speaks quietly, and you think she has not quite yet recovered from her ordeal in the glade. I owe you, and it's the right thing to do, no matter how much I hate it. You wait a little while longer for anyone else to step forward. Torkel volunteers as well as a couple of raiders whose names you never had the chance to learn. A little begrudgingly, George also steps forward, though he doesn't say what's on his mind as he does so. That is the last of the volunteers, and you feel the need to add something more into the end of your speech. We can do this. We have a chance. Trust in each other, fight together, and don't for one moment think that you're alone. and there is a chance. You can almost feel the air twist with the sudden surge of tension throughout the Oddskin. If they didn't know or understand the stakes before, they certainly all do now. You give one last nod, knowing there is very little else you can say at this point. Say your prayers and say your goodbyes. Let's finish this. As the group you've collected together goes about their final preparations, you find yourself wishing the time away. If only you could sleep, or it was a little closer to dawn. But no, you have to wait it out, just like everyone else. You think of all the formulae you know and have learned on your way to this moment. You think about Zahir and his teachings and everything that happened at the academy. Just a little. You're trying to let the questions whirling violently around your mind get to you too much. Namely, can you really beat something powerful enough to turn reality into illusions at will? You prepare all the gear you have left too, and then the faintest bit of color starts to leak back into the world and the sun begins to rise. You're watching clouds crawl into the morning sky by the Odyssey's makeshift door when Estrid finds you. She looks as tired as you feel, and you know she's thinking the same about you as she looks up and down. You're reminded for just a moment of how the two of you met when you met properly. And you know how much has changed for both of you since then. And you see on her face that life will never be the same again. You wouldn't have suspected it, but when you had first met her. The Fiend has uncovered as much about her as it has about you. She walks to stand beside you, looking at the horizon the sun will cross in an hour or so. We've both come a long way since we met, Outlander. I don't know about you, but I certainly did not expect our paths to cross quite like this. Are you ready? Yes, I am. She takes another look up and down at you, a little skeptical as to whether that is actually true. Neither of you dwell on it, though, lest that consume you instead. Your mind flits from one thought to another while Estrid finishes preparing herself. When she has done so, she clasps both of her band braces and looks at you again. All right. I trust you, and I you, Outlander. I'll find who I can and meet you over by the dunes. She clearly weighs up whether she has anything more to add before clapping you once on the shoulder. With that, she trudges back into the Odyskin to gather people up. Your mind turns to Maidner, Swiftwood, and Darksong. They may have something more to say to you before the end, given everything that's happened. Darksong. You first try to find Darksong, remembering with the expression on her face as she volunteered for the hunt. You find her outside the Odyskin, right by the shore, and letting the gentle waves wash over her shoes. While you are still some distance away, she glances around to look at you before going back to watching the sea. When you're a little closer, she speaks calmly without looking at you. Andin Erin Ama. How are you feeling? Still raw, a little humbled, very tired, and a little guilty. I haven't thanked you properly before now. In her hands, she is playing with a small stone that she picked up from the beach. All of a sudden, she throws it into the air, catches it in her other hand, and launches it violently into the sea. You hear it skip once, and then twice, and then disappear into the depths. When you turn back to Darksong, she's looking out where it vanished as if she is watching a ship sail away. It is going to take me a long time to feel as though I have left a life outside of this. She taps gently at one of the scars on her neck with one hand, but she quickly lets it fall again. But in the end, you are right. It is a part of who I am now. Thank you for reminding me of that. It is what any friend would do. She laughs and picks up another pebble. No, I don't think so. I don't think it would be easy for even the best people to choose what's easy over what's right. But it was right. You were right. She chokes out a frustrated laugh and looks at the sky. You see her grimace. I would have lost myself for nothing. It would have changed nothing. With that, she launches the pebble she has been holding into the sea with the same ferocity as before. You nod and the world around you falls quiet. So this is it. Do you feel any more ready than I do? Honestly, I don't know. She picks up another pebble and toys with it as you speak. This journey has been fraught since before it began, really. For all I know, we may be about to take the easiest step. Or it might yet be harder than anything we have faced yet. I really cannot say. One more stone is skipped into the ocean, this time with less anger, before Darksong turns towards you. Well, whatever happens next, I will be there by your side, as you were by mine. It is the least I can do. You owe me nothing, Darksong. You think you've struck some kind of nerve when she looks self-consciously at the floor for a moment. Then she looks back at you. There is new resolve and recognition there. Lysania. My name is Lysania. Though I really don't know how much that name belongs to me anymore. There are many things you could say in response to that, but you aren't sure any of it would feel right. Instead, you give a respectful bow of your head, and together with Lysania, you head back towards the Odyskin. From there, you point her toward where the hunting party is gathering and go off in search of other missing party members. Magnir is among those standing at the dunes, and so you set off to find him. You have some difficulty finding the wizard mage. You end up wandering twice around the entire Oscan that isn't so big as to lose someone before you find him. You are about to double check that he is not on the beach when he meanders out from between two of the tents. He looks as relieved to see you as you do him, grinning at you as he pulls a pipe out from his mouth. There you are. I thought it might be about time. I was just looking for you. Actually, I was about to start wondering where you might have gone. Oh, I'm sorry. I was enjoying one last pipe, one last look at the stars. He pockets his pipe and looks up into the night sky and the stars that are beginning to fade away above. You know, sometimes I wonder whether there is anything out there and whether we will ever know. Amongst the stars. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about them like that before. It is a strange thought. One day there will be nothing left to discover on this world. What then? Where do we go from there, if not somewhere else? Ah, but I digress. Time marches on and so must we. He smiles softly to himself as he starts padding through the sand towards the center of the Odyscan. You are quite remarkable, Maidner. He laughs and shakes his head, looking at the floor as you walk together. I am just a thinker. I have always been, for better or for worse. As you walk along in the dim twilight, you see him tense, just as little. If I do have one regret, it is that the heart of the Alphenson remains a mystery. I know the demon's tooth was far more important, and you did what you had to do to retrieve it, but it is a shame that was included in the price. You could go back when time is less pressing. It might even be easier the second time around. Maybe. I will not be able to manage it alone, that I know. It just would have been nice to come away with something, to prove there is value to my work. As it is, I will go on as I always have, or I will die horribly in the fight today. I do wish I had more supplies we could use. They're all gone now. I used them to help save Yasma's arm. You remember George's friend, whose arm was so heavily bandaged after the raid. She was not amongst the volunteers hunt down the fiend, hopefully recovering from her injuries. Now you had made her stand once again at the Odyssean's fire pit, and he turns to you, to look in you in the eyes. Farewell today, Outlander, and farewell overall if this is the end of our lives in the world. Perhaps we shall meet in the next, but no matter what, farewell. Farewell, Maidner. You point him to where your hunting party is beginning to gather before you continue on your way. You set about looking for Swafneld, and Maidner's levity quickly fades as dawn. She is inside the Odyscan at the back of one of the makeshift tents. She isn't alone. A few raiders are inside as well, talking amongst themselves or trying to get back to sleep. Swafneld seems to be half paying attention to them, glancing up and down at them every now and then. But mostly she seems focused on dragging a whetstone across the edge of one of her axes. When she sees you, she smiles broadly at you and shifts herself backward, and her head brushes the tent material. Welcome, Outlander. I am nearly ready. Once this is done, I will say my prayers, and then we can be on our way. Would you like for me to leave? No. In fact, I would welcome you to stay and pray with me, if you will. Every blessing will help in this fight. That is probably true, you think to yourself as you settle down. But that Swifmer lies the axe in her hand down in front of her and reaches to her side to take up the other. She lies that one down too, bows her head, and lifts her hands over them, her palms facing upwards. My name is not my own. It is borrowed from my forebears, and I must return it to them unsullied. My honor is not my own. It is an oath on my descendants, and I must pass it on to them unbroken. My courage, though, is mine alone, and it is given to me by Swafner. She takes a moment, breathing in deeply before she continues. O Swafner, brave conqueror, tireless hunter, watch over these weapons and their bearer. In your name and by your will, I go forth to fight, to build upon the honor of my forebears and prepare for the final fight. To fulfill my destiny, that is my goal. Grant me but a piece of your godly power and let me prevail. When she opens her eyes to scoop the axes out of the stand, you see a calm acceptance there. May your gods be with you, and yours with you. Without another word, she stands and makes for the outside world. You follow quietly, squeezing past the other raiders in the tent who have been watching the exchange in silence. The air feels fresher than it did before, and a cold breeze has risen up to make it racing. Swafneld stood looking at the sky, stretching out by her wrist, by quickly twisting her axes through the thin air. To honor and glory, then. She laughs, throws out one last violent swing with her axe, and turns back towards you. To honor and glory. She turns back towards you, her eyes gleaming with confidence. No matter what happens, it will not be the end. It is within Swafner's power to bring even outlanders to the eternal fight against Hrongar. If I die and I am at his side by the end of the day, then I shall wait for you there. For in this fight you will earn your place. It has been an honor. She claps you heavily on the shoulder and trudges off through the sand towards the Odyscan's door. You stand in a bit of a stunned silence before you follow after her towards the dunes. Dawn breaks with you all gathered on the banks of the beach with the fiend waiting for you all. You wonder where Oliver it will in fact join you, or whether in the end he decided to run. But no, he is the last to arrive, nothing on his back save for his axe. Many of the raiders treat him to cold, suspicious looks as he slides up to the group. He simply looks to you and Escher to lead the party on. Okay. You can start picking out clouds again against the morning sky as you finally trudge onto more solid ground. George's voice calls out from somewhere behind you as the party is making sure everyone makes it to the bank safely. You know where exactly we will try first. As you observe the quiet winter around you, your eyes are again drawn towards the Jalder Mountains. Your heart grows heavy when you look there, and the hole inside you threatens to tear open. It is exactly as though the fiend is attacking, even though there is not a hint of a storm to be seen. This way. Escher points exactly where as you look on. The Outlander and I know this place already. The clouds only darken as you continue onwards. They hover overhead, dark and menacing as the task ahead with little wind to move them on. None of you talk. You just march over the Thorwallian countryside, trying to keep a good pace without tiring yourselves too much. After only a couple of hours, you cross the road northwest out of Islesfell. After that, you think you're able to pick out landmarks, groups of trees, the shapes of the hills. You cannot be very far from where you and the siblings marched on your way to Jelvik. If anything, you are cutting across the path slightly further eastbound towards the higher peaks. You rake in the early afternoon atop a hill that gives you a good view of the area. Directly north of you is the forest at the edge of which Jelvik is nestled. You think you can see it some miles off, smoke no longer rising from the long-abandoned village. Then you are on your way again, still with little conversation and nerves growing steadily inside all of you. You finally pass the abandoned village in the mid-afternoon as you did the first time around. This time there are no guards, no prisoners, no signs of strange cultist activity. All is quiet as you take the road eastwards, the highest peaks now bearing down on top of you. The path starts leading upwards over rougher terrain and goes that way for an hour more or so before it splits off. The main path continues to the east into a pass through the mountains that you are told leads to Oplig. No doubt closed by the snows now, but it doesn't matter. Your head and your heart both tell you that it's not where you need to go. Your path leads to the north on a much smaller path that leads to a little more than a crack in the mountainside. The weight of it feels unbearable, and all you wish to do is go running back towards the beach. And that is how you know it's the way forward. One by one, you all slog up through the snow and into the gap into the craggy face of the mountains. You quickly tire of the sound of shuffling feet and steady but fatigued breathing. You tire of the brushing of stone and earth against your arms as the walls seem to close in around you. This place is far too narrow and far, far too quiet. The air is dry and still, and you can feel yourself and those around you beginning to strain. The path leads slowly, gently upwards at first. It is an uneven road cutting around sharp and jagged turns in the stone. The ceiling is low, and the tallest among you have to stoop under overhanging rocket points. Darksong, Lysania, though tall, seems to have the easiest time of it, slinking down the path silently. You are beginning to wonder how much longer it will go on before when the space suddenly opens up. It is not by much. The path may be wide enough for barely 2 people instead of barely 1. But in comparison to the claustrophobia before, this feels like true and complete freedom. It is not much later than that when Torkel, at the head of the party, stops short and you all come to a halt. You hear his voice stretching back to you out of the darkness, quiet and cautious. Up ahead. I do not like the look of that light. You push yourself onto the tips of your toes to see past those in front of you, craning your neck. He's right. Maybe a few dozen yards away, a sickly pale white-green light emanates from the path towards you. Even looking at it only worsens the dread that you feel building inside of you. If you did not know better, you could swear you hear the low, deep rumbling growl rippling across the stone. An invitation, or a warning. One last chance to run. Well, no way other than forward. It isn't lost on you that George says this from behind Orlver's back. You are a little further up than both of them, but you knew the marching order going into the mountain. You hear the question in George's voice, the, well, we're waiting, nature of it. Eventually the party does start forwards again. Slowly, carefully up the gentle slope into the very heart of the mountain, towards that pale light. It is bright enough that you can see you are walking into a much wider space still. A cavern of sorts, flat ground littered with rocks and boulders, the walls stretching up much higher above you. No need for torches, at least, but no sign at all of where the light is emanating from. Almost almost as a sense of danger that you suddenly feel the shielding spell comes to mind. As you step forward towards the cavern, you just start casting it almost absent-mindedly. You don't wish to take focus away from the shadows on the walls in case one of them moves and the trap is sprung, but you recall the motions and words and Lady Lasana taught you, and you feel your skin begin to itch. It takes a measure of strength not to squirm or make any noise of discomfort at the feeling of your skin tightening. But when the feeling subsides, you feel far more comfortable in the knowledge that you are safer now, or you would if it weren't for the dread and uncertainty passing down every fiber of your being. By now the party is spread out over the width of this natural chamber and the rocks, exploring every corner of it. Still some feet away from you, you see a large stone boulder. It looks as though many hundreds of years ago it might have become dislodged and fallen into place. And the chamber you're in stretches around it, like it is the center of the room. You're drawn to it, strangely, and to the dark markings painted on its surface. So focused are you on that you are taken completely by surprise when someone cries out behind you. There's a body here, I found a body. Her loud shouting rings out and catches everyone off guard. Maidner makes his way over to her, frantically covering his nose and mouth with his sleeve. You see him ducking down slightly out of view in an alcove in the back corner of the chamber. The raider who shouted gives him plenty of space, a disgusted expression on her face as she looks away. When Maidner reappears, hopping up from behind the rocks, he is also grimacing. Whoever he was, he has been here a few months at least. There is no sign of what killed him anymore, so be careful. There is soon no more of the place to be discovered. There are no other exits save the one you used to get here. There is still no sign of where the light is coming from. It seems to just sit in this place, reflecting off the stone walls and ceiling, casting its strange shadows. But then there is this boulder. You are puzzled by it. After rounding it a couple of times, you are drawn against the face nearest the exit to the cavern. This time you're closer, and Estrid is nearby you too. She is as memorized by it as you are. Her eyes focus on the markings on the face. She moves close enough to reach out to them, brushes her fingers over the red-brown strokes. Why do these markings feel so familiar? No answer to your question comes, and Estrid leans in even closer as she continues to examine the marks. A moment later, over the sound of your party's footsteps as they continue to look around, you hear her groan. Oh, it cannot be that simple. She turns to you, a look of revelation in her eyes. The shields, Outlander, and Jalvik. The pendant that the speaker used. You still remember it well. You still remember the markings arched around into a ring in lines and shapes that drew your eyes to them. You remember the gross feeling of discomfort they filled you with the speaker thrust his pendant towards you. As you look closer at these markings carved into the stone, then drawn over in blood, you realize you shall not know peace. This is what the speaker had spat at you. And as he had thrust his pendant towards you, a hole had been torn open in your soul. The soul of the fiend has been chewing at ever since. They woke up the fiend. The words barely escape your mouth, such as the shock that hits you. They were followers of the Restless One, like in the story Bran told us. They woke up the fiend and then they marked us for it when we attacked their camp. The spell worked because we had that fiend wanted, a discontent we hid from the world. Now you are certain you hear it, a rumbling, growling laugh from everywhere around you, from the deepest recesses of your mind. Your skin crawls and the hairs on your arms and the back of your neck immediately stand on end. You are overcome by a sudden, fearful discomfort that makes your whole body tense and roil. The light pulses, brighter and dimmer and brighter again. More weapons are unsheathed or readied as everyone sees the shadows start to move. Now you begin to step back from the stone, not taking your eyes off the ceiling. The laughter comes again, rippling over the rocks until it focuses on that central point. Everyone skitters back, their weapons and shields shaking in their hands as they resist the urge to turn and run. And you watch as it clambers up onto the boulder. Bathed in its sickly, unnaturally pale light, its claws press into the rock until it cracks underneath its grip. Oh my goodness, that is a very interesting design. Definitely a fiend. It stands above you as large as any beast as you've ever seen, leaving sheer and utter horror in its wake. Cries ring out behind you to see its skin and muscles slither and writhe. The deep-colored tears in its fur ripple and roll as its tendrils stretch themselves out menacingly. And its eyes, which stare out unblinkingly from where a saber-toothed cat's shoulder might once have been. Those otherworldly golden red eyes and the otherworldly fangs where bone should be. You do not want to see it, but neither can you look away. That hideous laughter now rings so loudly in your ears that it is deafening. And one by one, all of your defenses begin to crumble. I warned you all. Its voice is like a fire and sears through every inch of every one of you, bringing some of the raiders to their knees. Every moment of every day you spent at the academy plays across your mind in a single moment, and you try desperately not to be consumed by it. You should have run while you had the chance. With no further warning, the beast before you rears up and its tendrils lash out wildly. You are glad for the spell the Sonya taught you as you duck behind your arms for cover. A moment later, a tendril lashes across them violently. From the sharp sting of it, you expect your arms to be cut open by the attack, but your hardened skin holds strong. The force of it knocks you off your feet, though, and you're wrenched out of position and thrown across the room. You clatter to the floor and immediately protect your head with your arms in an attempt to avoid more of the coils. A heartbeat passes before you dare look up, and you see that the fiend has leapt up the boulder and into your allies. You clamber back to your feet and shake your head, trying to get a handle on what's happening before you. Immediately you see it as it landed on Torkel, who struggles separately underneath it. The fiend is currently focused on the rest of the group, swiping at them with a large, muscular paw. A handful of them, including Esther, scatter out of the way in an attempt to get around the creature. The woman who found the corpse leaps and rolls into a position behind it. She keeps a good grip on her weapon and jumps up to strike at its back with a ferocious cry. But you watch in horror as one of the golden eyes on the creature's shoulder snaps towards her movement. The tendril follows, shooting around her neck and snapping it in an instant. Without missing a beat, the tendril whips into the other direction. The woman's body is thrown away. It collides with Maidner and George, who stagger back from the fiend before they get a chance to strike. If you are to beat this creature, you know you have to strike it with Demon's Tooth. I don't want to use... Okay. Your mind races on a way to distract the fiend long enough for you to get close. Your eyes land on a small rock in the fiend's blind spot, and you hurry to cast Motoricus as quickly as you can. Gritting your teeth, you throw all of your strength into the spell, launching the rock in the demon's hide. When it hits, the fiend stops its battering and Torkel the ground in the direction from which the attack came. Sensing your moment, you rip the demon's tooth out of your belt and charge with all of your courage. It must hear your cry, for the fiend's eyes, or where its eyes should be, turned in your direction. A tendril lashes out, aiming for the hand holding the demon's tooth. You hear a sharp hiss where the tendril meets the tooth itself, and then a roar from the creature inside your mind. The tendril whips back again, the fiend leaps away from you, leaving you clutching your only real weapon. It was a ward, as well as weapon then. A good thing to know before the end. You watch as it bounds up the boulder and leaps again, pulling itself up with its front two paws. Before anyone can prepare for its second attack, it turns and dives into the group again. While it is still in the air, Maidner grips his staff with both hands and whisks the end of it forwards and upwards. An invisible force, neither air nor water, hits the fiend in the side and it is knocked off course with another growl. As it hits the floor on its flank, Torkel races forward again, dropping his axe to grapple the fiend with both hands. His arms lock around the creature's neck as he throws his body onto the floor, trying to keep it pinned. Before you can race forward with the tooth, the fiend's tendrils all rise up and strike him with a single mind. With eternal credit, he holds out for as long as he can, screaming in agony as the tendrils rip through him. Maidner quickly hobbles backwards, unable to look away from the horror before his eyes. You all follow suit, coming together in a loose group before George and the other raider whose shields are both up. Estrid quickly joins them to offer yet more protection, but you don't know how much it will help. Your eyes are fixed on the fiend, which is already back on its feet. It treads over Torkel's broken body, his blood still dripping from his tendrils, and stalks towards you. Each and every one of you who remains stands resolute and ready, snatching the moment to catch your breaths. How many lives is it worth? Its voice pours into your mind as the creature snarls and bares its teeth, the golden eye on its shoulder staring. You are half expecting it to continue speaking, but instead it lunges forward and takes you by surprise. The three shield bearers are ready for it, placing their shields perfectly to catch the fiend in the air. The fiend lands on the shields, pressing them closer to the bear's head as they strain under its weight. Before they can collapse, Estrid cries out and the three of them all shove together. You hear the fiend growl as the shields start inching upwards, lifting it away from the rest of you. Its claws release from the shield as it twists through the air and land back on its feet. Its tendrils lash out again and catch the last raider by the ankle before he can bring his shield back down. He screams as he hits the floor, twisting around to try and claw his way back to you before the fiend drags him away. The scream is very quickly silenced as a second tendril snakes around his neck and snaps it, and another body is thrown away. Now chaos ensues as the rest of you all attack the fiend as one. Oh dear. If I use Arcano, I'll use all of my magic. But I won't be able to cast another spell if I just use Motoricus. Fine. As soon as you are able, you start building your formula in your mind. The full focus on the fiend, you launch your spell and the blast of air surges forward towards it. Before it hits you, you see the fiend tense and hunker down. You can swear its claws puncture the stone at its feet, and you see whatever lies behind the cat royal. And when the blast hits, it barely moves. Just a tilt of its head, and yet more tension into all four of its paws, and now your allies are upon it. Swaffield and Orlver follow up on the attack, swinging wildly at the fiend to try to find any purchase with their axes. Neither of them do, and their weapons bounce or slide harmlessly off the creature before it bats them away. You really cannot be sure if you are making much of an impact. You make use of the distance you have, hoping to be joined by anyone who can make it out of the chaos alive. While it's distracted, you duck behind one of the alcoves at the back of the chamber. A moment later, George clatters down next to you. His arm is bloodied and blackened and clearly broken, and his buckler has been torn in half. There isn't much less I can do. He doesn't respond straight away, busy scrambling behind a rock and still cradling his arm. I think that was the right idea of that Outlander. We just have to be more coordinated. Your discussion is heard by a loud crack in the direction of the fight. Estrid hits the floor and comes rolling into view, her shield still tied to her arm but utterly destroyed. She groans and rolls onto her back, and George leans out to help her push herself behind cover. She's been injured in the fight as well, and blood drips down her face from a fresh wound. A moment later, you look back to see Orlver racing back in your direction as well. He has a horrid laceration across both his arms, but looks otherwise unharmed as he retreats. He dives into the alcove on the far side of the room from you, clutching his axe tightly as he breathes and glances over. We must buy you enough time to get close, Outlander. Our attacks must be relentless to keep it busy. No breaks in the fighting. Even as he speaks, you hear another strained cry. You dare to glance out behind her cover again. You see Swafna roaring as she uses one hand to swing an axe wildly at the fiend and the other to grab Maegner. She pulls him backwards so fiercely that he clatters to the floor, losing touch with the staff for a moment. As quickly as you've ever seen him move, he rolls onto his front, pushing himself up, and makes a hand gesture. A jet of water leaps from his hands and through the air, hitting the fiend square in the face. As it howls, Swapna now leaps back, picking Maynard up by the collar, lifting him back towards you. That is everyone who is left, except Lasagna. Straight away, you begin to worry, and you eke further out from behind your rock to look for her. You don't see her at the time you have to look, but you don't see her body either. Here's the plan. When I shout your name, you must charge and give this creature everything you have, Outlander. With every attack, you must get as close as you can, but try to stay hidden. George blanches and stops speaking as a mighty roar comes from behind you, and you feel the fear coming again. You hope that is the sound of the Sonic keeping the fiend frustrated long enough for George to even speak. Estrid, you must make sure the Outlander gets there. You are the last of line of defense. With that, he takes a deep breath in and repositions himself, gritting his teeth and bawling his eyes against the pain. Maegner! Right on cue, you hear Bane let out a battle cry, and watch as he pushes himself out from behind the cover. Across the chamber, the fiend stands ready, waiting for him, roaring in response to Maegner's cry. Maegner lets his staff fall and collects both of his hands and close to his chest. Water starts to collect from the space between the hands as if it were being drawn out of the very air around him. It spins into a sphere, always in motion and getting faster and faster with every moment. The fiend leaps up to pounce on the top of the mage and thrusts his arms forward with another cry. The sphere of water flies like an arrow towards the creature, hitting it like a tidal wave and throwing it backwards. The fiend slams into the central boulder, drenched through as it hits the floor with a heavy thump. Maynard has already pulled his staff back into his hands and now wields it like a combat staff. He twists each end of the staff forwards and upwards in turn, gritting his teeth as he strikes. On the other end of the magical force, the blows repeatedly slam the creature into the boulder. It's back, its head, and then it's back again. It lets out an angry but soft growl as Maegner sinks to his knees, finally sped and using his staff to lighten his fall. You two, go. You hear George shout behind you and suddenly remember you're supposed to be using this opportunity to move. You wait just a heartbeat longer to see how Estrid will proceed. While the fiend is distracted, she deftly sinks from around the rock, moving along the cavern wall. You follow as best you can, staying low and staying quiet while the fight continues nearby. There, the two of you are forced to wait for another opportunity to move forwards. Swafnold, as you race to the next rock that you can see, you hear Swafnold's loud and furious shout behind you. You turn in time to see one of her axes go spinning through the air past you and towards the fiend. The fiend growls again as it catches it across the face, knocking its head into the boulder again. Swafnold races past you after it, leaping towards it to pick it up before the fiend can stop her. No sooner is it in her hand does she throw it down on top of the fiend again. It's quickly followed by a second axe, which lands on the demon's head as it finally picks itself back to its feet. It bites and snaps out at Swafnold, catching her leg with its teeth. She growls as she raises her fist over her head and slams into the creature's head too. Recognize that now is your chance to move once again. The Swafnold is in serious trouble, and if she is killed now, you may never get your chance at all. As you push yourself up to reach your approach, you pick up a pebble and throw it at the fiend. The fiend growls at the pebble and hits its mark, turning just a little in your direction. That is also Swapnil deigns to renew her attacks, and you hear a louder growl as the fiend returns to the fight. She is now caught between the boulder and the fiend, holding its mouth open with her bare hands. All of his tendrils are pushing into her chest, and you see blood dripping to the floor where she stands. Swapnil doesn't care, straining against it as she tries to push it away, using the boulder behind her for support. The fiend roars in response. You see its muscles bulge and shift as it slams her back into the boulder. Or Swafner. Just like that, she loses her grip on the fiend's mouth. The creature surges forward, its teeth sinking into Swapnil's midsection. She seems to embrace the pain, looking down at the creature in a wild fury as she strikes and strikes again. Tendrils lash out to try and hold back her arms, but she grits her teeth and keeps fighting. Blow after blow after blow, she delivers onto the creature, screaming all the while. It releases her from its mouth, snapping its jaw up around her neck instead. Just in time, she bats the fiend away with an open hand and clamps down on her wrists instead. For Swafner, help me or over. Ooh, I need to read it. Okay. As Swafnil brings her free hand around the creature's neck, George dashes forward. Even with all the tendrils focused on her, she keeps the remains of his buckler held high to protect himself. But he leaps on top of the creature's back, desperately trying to push it back, blades down. Twists herself around and pulls too, and together they just about wrestle the fiend to the floor. Come on, Estrid, stay close. You support Estrid as she pulls herself back to her feet with a grimace, and together you race across the chamber. She falls back to the floor behind your last piece of cover, and you quickly duck down after her. Or over. Shouts across the chamber as tendrils loosen and some of them fly towards him. One wraps around his shield arm, twisting until the bone snaps beneath its grip. You look across and last see Orlver and see him there still, watching the fight from behind its alcove. His eyes meet yours as he looks away from the fight, and you see their struggle to move forwards. In an attempt to get Orville's attention, George shifts his weight just a little on the fiend's back legs. The fiend kicks back and George is thrown into the nearest wall, splayed out against in surprise. Before he can move, a tendril whips across his neck and his cry to Orville is cut short. George slowly sinks to the floor, staring at Swafnil continuing to fight as he manages to get a hand on his neck. He can't stop the bleeding, and a moment later he slumps down sideways, lifeless. Back in the alcove, Orville is looking out in despair as Swafnil desperately tries to keep the fiend pinned. As she screams as the tendrils lash out at her again, Orville looks at the ceiling and finally pushes himself up. With a loud shout, he sprints straight for the fiend and throws his axe away with a clear intention to join the grapple. Well, this is it, Outlander. I'll give you all the time I can. All the best. On the count of 3. 1. With that, you breathe together all the energy you have left to push yourself up to step away from behind the rock. It is immediately clear that Orville's round won't last much longer. Swapnil already looks as though she's half dead, more blood and bruise in person at this point. Orville is not very much better, struck by tendrils the moment he joined the fight. In fact, as you watch, Swapnil's strength finally falls and the fiend begins to wriggle free of her. In one last rageful fit of heroics, she screams right into the demon's face and headbutts it under the chin. The fiend rears back into Orville's waiting arms and he locks his arms around it, pulling it back to the floor. But neither of them can do anything about the tendrils that belt and strike them both in the neck. It all creates just enough time for Estrid to be able to take over the fight. She swerves towards the fiend, popping left, right, and left again to avoid the demonic tendrils. As she approaches, she leaps up and hurls the broken remains of her shield towards the fiend's eyes. The fiend growls and tries to catch her with the tendril, but she snatches it out of the air before it can strike her face. Then she's there, kicking down into the shoulders and grabbing its head before she hits the floor. She curls herself into a ball, shifting her weight, protecting her neck while she clings to the fiend's underside. You have nothing left to do but to chase after the demon's tooth in hand, and hope that all this is worth it. You race forward, the demon's tooth raised high, and watch as the fiend tries to push itself free. You are certain the fiend is going to rip Estrid apart before you can get there. But you stop short as you hear a sharp, dissonant whistle from above your head. You turn around behind the source, looking at the top of the building and see nothing. And you hear a loud thud as the fiend's head is driven straight into the stone by some invisible source. A surprised hiss escapes its mouth as it tries to pick itself up, but the same invisible force hits it again. It sends most of its visible tendrils flying through the air in front of it, hoping to catch whatever it's attacking. And you hear an amused, almost cruel laugh as right before your eyes, Lasagna appears from nowhere. The tendrils are wrapped around her arms and her face, and her face is a bloody cut from her eyebrow to her mouth. She smirks as she fades back into view, blood dripping to the floor, and the fiend growls angrily at her. Do you think this is pain? Gritting her teeth, she clasps the tendrils in her hands and pulls herself forward as she jumps. She twists herself around mid-flight, pulling the tendrils across each other. She lands on the creature's back, pulling them into its neck as she slides off to the side. The fiend has no choice but to follow the course of its own body, clasping down, following Lasagna's cue. She ends her maneuver by using her trapped leg to drag herself to the fiend. She finally pulls her tied arms up as much as she can, locking the fiend in place. Help me, Estrid. I can't hold this for long. Estrid drives forward, jumping on top of the fiend's lower back and digging her knees into trap it. You practically fall on top of them to get close enough to strike the tooth. You are inches away from attacking the tendril, rids itself free of Lasagna's grip and wraps around your neck. Your eyes are wide and you brace yourself to death. The tendril yanks you closer without snapping your neck. As you are dragged across the floor, you came to a stop right up to close to one of the fiend's terrible golden eyes. There's a bright white flash telling the world goes quiet except for the slight ringing in your ears. You blink back your surprise, looking at the stonework and greenery around you. Here again, feeling as though you've awoken from a truly horrible dream. As though this is what's real, because it was real. But there is a presence here with you this time, leeching off the pain, enjoying every moment you sit in these gardens. Remember just how hurt you were to be abandoned. This again. Not that you're left anymore to draw emotion in your voice. It is cracked and tired, broken. How many times have you shown me this? Next to you, you feel the figment turn its head and observe you for a long moment before speaking. This is your life. Try as you might to deny it, I did not start this struggle of yours. 4 words come to your mind, 4 very familiar words. There is no escape. There is no escape. Already your body begins to crawl at the deeper, more powerful layer of speech that lies behind Zahir's voice. Tell me, Nadim, was it worth it to kill me? It will not make this any less real. With or without me, you will always suffer, and already others have suffered too for the choice you made to fight. Just stop. Just give in. Just accept it. Your hand tightens into a fist on your lap, and only now do you feel the dry, cold touch of the demon's tooth. You daren't look down to make certain it is a tooth, and nor do you know whether the fiend senses its presence. But as the fiend does what it has always done, you feel the cool, calming peace of mind given to you by Travia's herald. It makes the fiend's words ring differently than they would without that protection. Yes, you were angry that the Pentringham Academy abandoned you when you didn't live up to their expectations. You felt lost and alone and feared you might never find that guidance, particularly when the Renajasko turned you away as well. And you blamed yourself for failing so often and for so long, but all of that blinded you to another equally real and important truth. It was not the only way to move forwards. I trust myself now. There's a tingling in your fingers where your fingers touch the talisman. It is not just a peace of mind now, but a combative confidence. It spreads subtly at first, and then grows bigger and bigger inside of you. And that confidence rings in your words as you look straight ahead into the bright gardens of the Academy. I trust myself far more now than when I left Roshdul. And a lot of that is down to you, because of all I've done this time I've spent hunting you down, I know what I'm capable of now. You find yourself nodding, your grip on Demon's Tooth so tight now that your hand is beginning to ache. I know I can come back from this, and I know I can destroy you. Before you lose your will, you throw yourself around to strike the figment fiend in the chest with the demon's tooth, and the moment you strike, there's a deafening roar that bombards you from every direction. You feel a rush as the fiend tries to pull the remaining life force from you in the moments before you can free yourself. You grit your teeth and hold on for as long as you can as the world around you begins to shift and crack. The figment in front of you vanishes from sight and you fall into the bench and then onto the floor. The stonework around you crumbles. The very roots of the plants and trees shake as the fiend is ripped out of its own illusion. From around your neck, you feel a pressure vanish that you weren't even aware of. And your eyes flash open as you return to the real world, breathing deeply before you run out of air. Next to you, the fiend writhes that tries to escape in time. You give it no such opportunity. With every ounce of life and feeling you have left, you lift your arm to strike the demon's tooth. It strikes the monster right in its golden eyes, sinking deep into the flesh and sending ooze spraying across you. Inside your head and across the chamber, you hear a roar and a scream of absolute and undeniable agony, but certainly not unenviable. You strike again and again as the creature struggles beneath you, boiled by every blow you deliver. Next to you, the creature's tendril releases Estrid, and you hear her gasp as her eyes open wide. Lasagna's two fineless tendrils fall from her hands, and they immediately loosen their grip on her arms. She clatters backwards as you continue to strike, making absolutely certain the creature is dead. Only when the creature lies still do you finally push yourself backwards and the demon's tooth falling from your hand. In your mind, there are echoes in that final death rattle, the roar that has haunted you ever since the night at the Hetman's feast in this vessel, but the only sound in the chamber you hear is your own heavy breathing. The pale, sickly glow fades and you left in darkness. You almost throw up some of the creature's bile drips into your tongue. You spit it out and wipe it away from your mouth, your eyes never leaving the hulk of the saber-toothed cat. It's over. Only now do you become truly aware of the other people still conscious or alive in the room with you. Your eyes flick over to Estrid, whose outline collapses back against the boulder the fiend first sprung from. When all is said and done, it is only Lysania who is left standing amidst the chaos. She too breathes heavily, but says nothing as she pulls off her ruined gloves to look at the fresh wounds on her arms. You simply cannot bring yourself to speak. It is over. You can already feel a weight has been lifted off of your body. The hole is still there, you recognize that too. The fiend never put it there to begin with, but it is no longer gnawing at the ever-present wound. That maybe, just maybe, it will be allowed to heal, if you let it. Departure. Oops. The first task, horrid as it is trying to account for who survived the encounter. Vaidner, whose power let you get even close to the fiend in the first place, is unconscious but alive. You wake him on the second attempt, and the first thing he asks is if his distraction worked. Lysania, of course, who says she is fine, though you can not quite believe it for the big, bloody wounds on her arms. Orlver was not so lucky. He lies still where he fell against the fiend, a look of peace on his face that makes him look far younger than when you met him. Vaidner is the one to close his eyes, and the moment leaves all of you with a strange sense of sorrow. Was he doomed? Was this some kind of redemption? Questions for another time. There are far fewer questions about Svafneld. She died a truly heroic warrior's death. Some part of you had hoped that she might have been able to recover from her wounds. In the end, she fought too hard and for too long, and they were simply too great. That's it. George and Torkel, both raiders whose names you never learned. They died so that you may have a chance of life. There is a strange and uncomfortable feeling. A life for a life for your life. You're grateful, yes, but you also wish it had not come to that. You don't have what you would need to carry them back to the camp. There are far too few of you left. Estrid does what she can to deface the symbol left on the fiend's resting place with her sword. She tries to carve the markings of Sveipnir Travia over the top of it. All the bodies are lined up and put to rest, given their weapons and armor, all except the fiend's. Estrid takes a trophy from that just to prove it is actually dead, and then it is dragged through the narrow tunnels of the mountain to the outside world and burned. By all who remain, hope and pray that you never see the likes of it in this world again. You are surprised to find it is still light outside. The clouds have cleared and a red sun is dipping towards the distant western horizon. It is still cold. Even colder than before, perhaps. But the world feels lighter now. You find yourself wishing that you could enjoy it more. Perhaps it hasn't hit you yet that this is all actually finally over. It is the same for everyone. No one speaks at all. No breaks were taken. You've all just marched back towards the beach, trying to keep at bay most of what you experienced in that mountain. Night has long since fallen when you finally trudge back onto the beach. A couple of raiders are posted at the open Oniscan door, and they see you coming. They are surprised to see you, to say the least, running to meet you before you get to the camp. They can't believe you are actually alive. Relieved, they escort you back towards the Oniscan. By then, you see that everyone has been waiting for your return. Gunnar leads the group, his arms lightly folded as he looks around to see who made it back. His face falls when he sees that Orlver is not among you. Not one other person asks or even seems to notice, but Gunnar is stricken with both grief and anger, mourning a man that you never really knew. Aki holds out for Svafneld, and his face falls when he sees that she has not returned. Amongst all the prayers said for her when Maidner announces that she fell, his are the most passionate. Torkel and George and the others received their prayers as well. George's friend who fought Estrid with the two tested you, Yasma, Maidner called her, is heartbroken. It is only after the dead have been respected does the focus shift to the living. No one is happy, but you are congratulated. A great victory, they call it. The gods and your families will be proud, they tell you. It goes on for some time before the crowd finally begins to thin out. Eventually, it is just Gunnar who stands with you, all by the now roaring campfire. Piece by piece, person by person, you take him through the exact details of the fight. You all struggle at points, but Gunnar is patient with you. When the story is done, he stands in silence for a long moment before he finally responds. I wish I knew what to say. I wish Orlver had returned with you. I know how most of you feel, but I still miss him. I will miss him. I wish you had known the man he used to be. It's strange. We have spent many weeks focused on this one task. Now that it is over, I cannot even begin to think what comes next. I will wait until morning, and then we will strike the Oniscan and go back to the Keen Wolf. I think it is time to leave this shore behind us. I suppose this is where we leave you. It is not very far from here to Alsfell. With the good speed, I may even sleep under my own roof this evening. Gunnar looks from her to you, and then back again and scratches his beard. He seems to think for a long moment before he sighs and shrugs and looks at you both again. A lot has changed since first you two came aboard the Keen Wolf. The Odeshaska took a long while to trust you both, but with this behind you, they likely do now. You can stay if you'd like. We certainly have space now if you wish to come with us. The offer stuns you slightly. It hardly registers, so numb are you from all that has happened. But you look at Maynard, he seems slightly boiled by the idea. You have to think for a few minutes before you can give your answer. You consider it for a brief moment before you remember all the things Zafine has taught you. You find yourself shaking your head. I need to go my own way for a while, continue learning, standing on my own 2 feet. You receive a chorus of understanding nods from both Maynard and Gunnar, but his attention quickly turns to Estrid. She seems genuinely torn on the idea. She avoids looking at any of you until she has made her decision. Eventually, she seems to give up on whatever struggle she is having internally and shrugs. Yes, why not? If I have learned nothing else on this quest, then I have learned I am not yet the het woman my people want. I have a lot I need to learn about myself before I can lead properly, and that's alright. Sometime an Odajaska like this might help me with that. Gunnar's the first to nod. Very well. It is a shame, Outlander, but your decision will be respected. Perhaps we will meet again regardless. It is a small world and quickly traveled in the grand scheme of things. Maynard next turns to Lasagna, who has stood quietly by the fire for some time listening to all of this. What will you do now? She stares into the fire for a few minutes before her eyes flick to you. I have another fight coming for me. Despite her words, she is wearing a real genuine smile. It will probably leave Thorwall, so that I don't bring bad luck on any other Ostraskas. Thorwall is among you. I'll laugh at that, and you smirk as well. Now her smile fades, and she thinks for answering the question. Whatever the case, I need to put as much between me and Austria as I can. When the past catches up with me, because it will, I would like to be ready for it. All the best. As Lasagna nods her thanks, Estrid turns to you and breathes in deeply. Let's begin our journey now, Outlander. We are about to have a very critical conversation with my father. You say your goodbyes properly now that it is all over. Every member of the group with which you have been through so much together wishes you good fortune. The Thorwaller will say they will see you again in the eternal fight. And the last person to say goodbye to you is Gunnar. He shakes your hand and manages a wry smile. Goodbye, Outlander. All the best on your path. Don't go causing too much trouble. Farewell, Gunnar. All the best to you and the entire Odajasko. Then it is finally time. You must reach Isvessel in the early hours of the morning. Truly, it is a sight for sore eyes. And sore your eyes are by the time you reach the palisade. Sore and in desperate need of sleep. But true to your word, you accompany Estrid through the town on her way to Ulfgar's hall. Such is the time that the streets are completely empty. So the longhouses is still bright and warm. But with the winter now truly upon them, even the Thorwaller are careful to stay inside at this hour. There are a few moments I was not sure I'd see this place again. Nothing has changed. Life goes on, I suppose, but that will change now when they hear about what you've done. You'll be a hero. We will both be heroes. No details ever left out of the Thorwallian saga, Outlander, and if they try to leave you out of this one, they will have me to answer to. And it is more than I should ask, Outlander, but I will. I'd like you to be there with me when I tell my father of my decision to leave. He may think me mad, but perhaps he can stand as a witness to my lucidity. I'll understand if you wish to say no, though. Of course I will. With a grateful smile, she puts a hand on your shoulder and grips it tightly. The two of you speak very little after that, and only about minor things when you do. The truth is, you are both focused on those last few steps before you call this whole business over. The Hetman's Hall is not as busy as you saw it, but it's still fairly loud given the time. You are not entirely sure what reception you expected, but it certainly wasn't the one you receive. Opening the doors, at first you receive no reaction at all. People keep drinking, chatting, milling around as if you have not yet noticed who has come through the door. Ulfgar sits at the table, deep in conversation with the others that sat around him. Sits next to him, laughing at the joke of someone else at the table, a cup of mead in hand. And not far away the goatee, Brand, sits alone and silently, carefully observing the proceedings. It's him that sees you first, squinting at you with his hooded eyes as you both approach. They have returned! His voice carries over the hall, bringing it slowly to silence. Rasker chokes on his drink as he finally notices his sister walking towards him. By the gods, you did it! Yes, brother, we did. My child! No one can stop the Hetman from racing down from the table to embrace his daughter. You did it, you actually did it. The fiend of the restless one is dead. Yes, father, the fiend is dead. For a long moment, Ulfgar simply looks at her. Then with a smile, he gives her another long and loving hug. Oh, how I have missed you. And we have all missed you. I am happy beyond relief that you have returned. The room breaks into a round of applause and bangs on the tables while the two of them embrace again. Come, sit down, both of you. You must tell us all the tale. And what a tale it is. You let Estrid do most of the talking, and the crowd gathers and listens as if she's retelling one of the greatest stories ever told. But perhaps the most attentive listener of all is Brand. He consistently stops the story to ask questions and moves about the nature of the Nemenid. The only detail missed is, once again, what exactly happened beneath the Alkenfelsen. That remains a tightly guarded secret between you and Estrid. Otherwise, it is all recounted almost blow for blow. You are assured the sun must be close to rising again. The tale is through. But that is a tale if I have ever heard one. Ulcar immediately turns to you, leaning across the table to grip you on the shoulder. I must thank you, Outlander. Really, thank you. I am deeply in your debt for your help. Without it, who knows what might have happened. Rasker laughs and takes a swig of his ale. It sounds as though Escher might have been killed. It's not a laughing matter, Rasker. Not anymore. May I ask what you do now, Outlander? You are most welcome to stay as my guest for as long as you wish. Actually, Father, there is another matter we must discuss first. Perhaps without such a crowd. As promised, you stand by Escher's side while she tells her family about her decision to leave the isle behind. As promised, it does not go well. At first, both her father and brother seem to think it might be some kind of joke. Escher has to repeat herself twice before her father begins to understand. Even then, Rasker looks as though he cannot quite believe what he is hearing. What of being Hetwoman, Escher? That is all you've ever worked for. I am just not ready, Rasker. Escher stays as calm and collected as she can as she tries to explain it. Perhaps when I am older, I will think differently, but now, I am just looking for something else in life. While they speak, Ulfgar turns to you, stroking his beard as if he is in deep in thought. What do you say about this, Outlander? This journey has changed me too, Hetman. I'm not certain how, but I know that I am different from when I was before. I want different things now too. I am not saying goodbye forever, Father. If I ever feel really, really ready to leave, then perhaps I will return. If you've survived that long. Escher begins to make a face at her brother's words, but Ulfgar quickly stops her. No, Escher, your brother is right. You're risking everything I taught you for this. And that is my risk, Father. This isn't a discussion. My mind won't be changed. I know what I need to do. For me. Nearby, you see Rasker shake his head as he stands up out of his chair and stretches. Escher looks disappointed as she watches him walk away out of the door behind you all. But she quickly turns back to her father, who's still shocked and despondent. Trust me, Father, I need to do this. Just as much as I needed to deal with the fiend. The Hetman looks at her for a long moment before he seems to accept it and sigh. She hugs him again, then, and promises that she will take care of herself. They look at each other for a long moment before he rolls his eyes and seems to accept the situation. Fine, go before I get it in my head and to try to stop you. And visit, you always have a home here, even if you decide to change your mind again. Wish Rasker all the best with his candidacy for me, and say goodbye to him too. She keeps a tight grip on his shoulder a moment longer before she bows her head to him respectfully and they separate. Ulfgar gives you the room after that, disappearing through the same door as Rasker before him. Are you sure I cannot convince you to come with me? Positive, I have my own path to take. Well then, this is where we part ways for now, though I hope it isn't the last time we see each other. Goodbye, my friend. All the very best to you, and to you. Never forget that you have friends in Thorwald. We'll certainly remember you. With that, she stands at her full height and salutes you with a fist on her heart. With one last look around her home, she collects her things and heads back to the door. Walking past, she nods and smiles at you one last time. A whole new adventure to begin. Phew! Well, that was fun. I really enjoyed the story for this. I wonder if the story's different if you play as the dude instead. Maybe I'll do that on my own time. Definitely a very interesting story, and I really enjoyed that. I like the Fiend's design, like that's really cool. That I don't know. I know that at the start you could pick Nadim to play as, or you could pick a soldier. And I picked Nadim, but I don't know if the story is like the same story if you pick the guy instead. I might look at it on my own time. I mean, it looks like there are multiple endings, because you could go your own way like I chose, or you could stay with the Thorwallers, which I imagine are the two differences in the endings. But that was fun. I did enjoy that.